The most popular one is contributor covenant. It's got a Wikipedia page. They say that there's over 40,000 open source projects that are using it. It was created in 2014, and in 2016, Google added it to their official pipeline. So if you're setting up GitHub added it. So if you're setting up a project on GitHub, when you actually create it, it asks you, it actually gives you like this yellow warning sign to say you don't have a code of conduct. Would you like to add one? And then you can select between the contributor covenant or the citizen code of conduct. Now, if you're also creating a new project on GitHub, you'll get similar prompts like for what license you wish to use and what code of conduct you wish to use. So that landed in 2016. The contributor covenant says there's over 40,000 open source projects that use it. But let's actually read through it. Okay, here we go, code of conduct. So this is the contributor covenant. I wonder if we can, okay, this is the latest version. So our pledge: in the interest of fostering an open and welcoming environment, we as contributors and maintainers pledge to make participation in our project and our community a harassment-free experience for everyone, regardless of age, body size, disability, ethnicity, sex characteristics, gender identity and expression, level of experience, education, socioeconomic status, nationality, personal appearance, race, religion, or sexual identity and orientation. Our standards. Examples of behavior that contributes to creating a positive environment include using welcoming and inclusive language, being respectful of different viewpoints and experiences, gracefully accepting constructive criticism, focusing on what is best for the community, showing empathy towards other community members. Examples of unacceptable behavior by participants include the use of sexualized language and imagery, and unwelcome sexual attention or advances, trolling, insulting, derogatory comments, and personal and political attacks, public or private harassment, publishing others' private information such as physical electronic address without explicit permission, other conduct which could reasonably be considered inappropriate in a professional setting. Our responsibilities: project maintainers are responsible for clarifying the standards of acceptable behavior and are expected to take appropriate and fair corrective action in response to any instances of unacceptable behavior. Project maintainers have the right and responsibility to remove, edit, or reject comments, commits, code, wiki edits, issues, and other contributions that are not aligned to this code of conduct, or to ban temporarily or permanently any contributor for other behaviors that they deem inappropriate, threatening, offensive, or harmful. Scope. This code of conduct applies both within project spaces and in public spaces where an individual is representing the project for its community. Examples of representing a project or community include using an official project email address, posting by an official social media account, or acting as an appointed representative at an online or offline event. Representation of a project may be further defined and clarified by project maintainers. Enforcement. Instances of abusive, harassing, or otherwise unacceptable behavior may be reported by contacting the project team at blah. All complaints will be reviewed and investigated and will result in a response that is deemed necessary and appropriate to the circumstances. The project team is obligated to maintain confidentiality with regard to the reporter of an incident. Further details of specific enforcement policies may be posted separately. Project maintainers who do not follow or enforce the code of conduct in good faith may face temporary or permanent repercussions as determined by other members of the project's leadership. I've just had Fred from the group chat say he's given a Y Combinator link. Let's check that out. Hide my history. Open code of conduct. So here's another one. And Fred said, which had this gem buried in it. Our open source community prioritized marginalized people's safety over privileged people's comfort. We will not act on complaints regarding reverse-isms, including reverse racism, reverse sexism, and cisphobia. Same document, essentially. Many such cases that have gone unenforced. Let me just see if I can find that. Yeah. And let's open that one up. Oh, it's not working. Maybe they've taken it down. It's about, okay, I'll see if people can find the link to that one. Alrighty, so the criticisms of this one, specifically, there isn't really any scope where this doesn't apply. It applies in people's professional and personal life, providing you are associated with that project. This comes important later. And also, these things are pretty much political. For instance, how do you actually, for instance, with gender identity and expression, as well as the combination of things, for instance, certain political opinions will disagree, or even religious opinions will disagree with this. We'll touch on that later. And for this, so we'll see in the ways that, this sounds quite nice, but the way it's being used is a bit concerning. So this was created by Caroline I'm so sorry for horribly mispronouncing your name. So Caroline is a software engineer, software developer and open source advocate based in Chicago. She began as a web developer in 1994, and she was part of the Ruby community and created the Contributor Covenant. She's her website is Where Caroline Codes, which is actually an interesting read. So this quote, actually, notable Rubyist, nefarious code witch, and notorious socialist justice warrior. This last bit is from a Breitbart article discussing her. So she's decided to own that title. Now, she's got a blog post where she posts some interesting things. I think it's, writing. And I've read through these. For instance, we'll be discussing a few of them. And there's other sources here. She's written, I believe, at last count, 25 Ruby gems. Yeah, 25 Ruby gems, which get 475,000 downloads. I'm not sure if that's per month or just in total. Okay. Now, that contributor covenant has been pushed by GitHub. It recently was added to Linux. So this is one of the reasons why we considered doing this as a topic. Linux is one of the pieces of infrastructure, computing infrastructure, that powers most computers around the world. The servers, pretty much, if you use technology, at some point, Linux is being used, if not, probably in a double-digit percentage through your interactions. So Linus Torvalds is the creator of Linux. It's named after him. So Linus recently wrote, he did a new release of Linux 4.19.rc4 of the Linux kernel, where he discussed that, okay, it's not that long. This is the important bit. So I'll just read this out. So this email got a lot, so these are release notes that he wrote to accompany that release. So this email got a lot longer than I initially thought it would get, but let's start out with a regular Sunday release. But another week, another RC. Nothing particularly odd stands out in the technical side of this kernel updates for last week. RC4 looks fairly average in size for the stage in this release cycle, and all the other statistics look pretty normal too. We've got roughly 2/3 of driver fixes. Okay, blah, 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 blah. The one change that stands out and merits mention is the Code of Conduct addition. And here comes the other much longer part, which brings me to the not normal part of the last week. Discussions both in public, mainly on the kernel summit discussion list, and then a lot in various private communications about maintainership and the kernel community. Some of that discussions came about because of me screwing up my scheduling for the maintainer summit, where these things are supposed to be discussed. Okay, so he screwed up some scheduling, disappointed some people, wasn't able to attend a conference. It's been rescheduled. And he starts to say, well, this has been a look yourself in the mirror moment. So here we are, me finally on the one hand realizing that it wasn't actually funny or a good sign that I was hoping to just skip the yearly kernel summit entirely. And on the other hand, realizing that I really had been ignoring some fairly deep-seated feelings in the community. It's one thing when you can ignore these issues. Usually it's just something I didn't want to deal with. This is my reality. I am not an emotionally empathetic kind of person, and that probably doesn't come as a big surprise to anybody, least of all me. The fact that I then misread misread people and don't realize for years how badly I've judged the situation contributed to an unprofessional environment is not good. This week, people in our community confronted me about my lifetime of not understanding emotions. My flippant attacks in emails have been both unprofessional and uncalled for, especially at times when I made it personal. In my quest for a better patch, this made sense to me. I know now this was not okay, and I'm truly sorry. The above is basically a long-winded way to get to the somewhat painful personal admission that, hey, I need to change some of my behavior, and I want to apologize to the people that my personal behavior hurt and possibly drove away from kernel development entirely. I'm going to take time off and get some assistance on how to understand people's emotions and respond appropriately. Put another way, when asked at conferences, I can actually talk about the pain points in kernel development have generally not been about the technical issues, but about the inflection points where development flow and behavior changed. These pain points have been about managing the flow of patches and often have been associated with big tooling changes, moving from making releases with patches and tarballs, and then the very painful discussions about how Linux doesn't scale back 15 plus years ago, to using BitKeeper and then having to write Git in order to get past the point of that no longer working for us. We haven't had that kind of pain point in about a decade, but this week felt like that kind of pain point to me. To tie this all back to the actual 4.19.rc4 release, no, really, this is related. I actually think that 4.19 is looking fairly good. Things have gotten to the calm period of this release cycle, and I've talked to Greg to ask him if he'd mind finishing up 4.19. This is not some kind of I burnt out, I just need to go away break. I'm not feeling like I don't want to contribute maintaining Linux. Quite the reverse. I very much do want to continue to do this project that I've been working on for almost 3 decades. This is more like the time I got out of kernel development for a while because I need to write a little tool called Git. I need to take a break to get help on how to behave differently to fix some issues in my tooling and workflow. And yes, some of this might be just tooling. Maybe I can get an email filter in place so that when I send emails with curse words, they just won't go out. Because, hey, I'm a big believer in tools, and at least some problems going forward might be improved with simple automation. I know when I really look myself in the mirror, it will be clear it's not the only change that has to happen. But hey, you send me suggestions in email. I look forward to seeing you at the Maintainer Summit. So that's his release summary that changed Linux's code of before they had a code of conflict, and then they swapped it out with the contributor covenant. I believe this is the commit that did it. Yeah.
So they incorporated the code of conduct that you read from earlier, like they just adopted it. Okay.
Yeah, and there's a lot of discussion here about people critiquing it. A very long-winded discussion about people, thinking about their thoughts on it and whatnot. Okay, so this is the thing. Showing 3 change file. So before they had this code of conflict, let me, view the code of conflict file. So this was what they had before, which said, the Linux kernel development effort is a very personal process compared to traditional ways of developing software. The code and ideas behind it will be carefully reviewed, often resulting in critique and criticism. The review will almost always require improvements to the code before it can be included in kernel. Know that this happens because everyone involved wants to see the best possible solution for the overall success of Linux. This development process has been proven to create the most robust operating system kernel ever, and we do not want to do anything to cause the quality of submission eventual result to ever decrease. If, however, anyone feels personally abused, threatened, or otherwise uncomfortable due to this process, this is not acceptable. So please contact the Linux Foundation's Technical Advisory Board or the individual members, and they will work to resolve the issues to the best of their ability. For more information on who is on the Technical Advisory Board and what the role is, please see blah. As a reviewer of code, please strive to keep things civil and focus on technical issues involved. We are all humans, and frustrations can be high on both sides of the process. Try to keep in mind the immortal worlds of Bill and Ted. Be excellent to each other. So this is the discussion thread where they discuss the change. But this was done without like a public feedback mechanism. Linux and Linux kind of pushed for it, I guess, or at least this was a PR for it. I'm not particularly sure how exactly it went down. But I guess this was a pull request that was then merged.
Yeah, Friedrich brought up a quote, I guess, from Linus or Linus. He made a statement somewhere along the lines of, I didn't want a COC, then I became a hero for people I don't like, and I don't want to be their hero more than I don't want a COC. Indirect quote. Right. So, I guess, so was there like what was the like difference in time, I guess, between the original COC and then Linux's adoption of it? Is it like a week?
Yeah, no, so the initial COC for this one has probably been around for a few years. Let me find this out. Okay, 3 change files, and this one, and view. All right, and history. All right, so this one was added, I guess, in 2016.
Well, I guess, like...
the code of conflict. And
yeah, when was Coraline's, I guess, introduction of the COC? Like, what is the time frame between...
Yeah, so Coraline wrote the contributor covenant in 2014, and she joined GitHub in 2016 as part of becoming a evangelist for communities at GitHub, or to kind of facilitate community development. GitHub, I should say, is like Facebook for programmers. It's where they store all of the code. It's a social network. People browse each other's profiles, follow people's work, comment on code. They submit changes to code. It's where pretty much all software development happens. There's private repositories and public repositories. So that's part of it. Linux is also now developed on GitHub. Pretty much there was some alternatives to GitHub, but now everybody just uses GitHub because of its social network power.
So I guess the COC rules are enforced upon everyone that uses GitHub, like even like within the, I don't know, the chat or comments section of GitHub. I'm not entirely sure how it runs.
Yeah. So GitHub, if we go all the way down, they have, I think they have terms, but I'm not sure they specifically have a code of conduct. This is GitHub's terms, but I'm not sure that they have their own code of conduct. I think a year ago or so, I read something like, if you don't have a code of conduct, you kind of inherit by proxy GitHub's one. But either way, like, you kind of have to follow GitHub's. But GitHub's one is a lot more like, is, your basic terms of service, don't do anything illegal, I guess. But the power of the code of conduct, like the contributor covenant, is once a community adopts it, then anyone who does something anywhere related to a project can then be punished in their project. So we'll see this actually in the next parts of this. It should be worth saying that this Linux thing caused a lot of controversy. There's the pull request. So a lot of Linux developers actually started leaving. I'm not sure exactly, a lot is a bit ambiguous, but I would say maybe in the dozens. I'm not sure if it's more than a dozen. So the Linux developers, but then they even actually thought that they could revoke their contributions. And apparently this has been considered to be legally possible. So they would be able to pull the contributions from Linux because of this, and they may also be able to seek severance. So this news article goes more into this, into the claims. Yeah.
Don't you kind of like forfeit your right to own a piece of code if you put it for open source?
So this is one of the interesting things. So Linux is licensed under the GPL, the GNU Public License version 2. Now, Linus Torvalds, the creator of Linux, is steadfast against GPL version 3. because of different reasons. He considers when software is made for specific hardware, they shouldn't be forced to release it. Where with GPL version 3, they may be forced to release customized software for specific hardware. So Linux has just continued to use GPL version 2, but GPL version 3 actually includes a clause specifically related to preventing people from being able to revoke their contributions. This is this bit here. And apparently in some countries, there's even the ability to seek severance when the telos, I guess, of a community, so the goals of which people contributed to, doesn't see fruition. So the issue there is people worked for a meritocracy. They volunteered their time, and for the goal of rewards of reputation. Whereas now with the new contributor covenant, it's not particularly valuing a meritocracy anymore. And it's not particularly clear from the contributor covenant, like you can think of it, but it's kind of these things like welcoming and inclusive language. So the left, they call a lot of language dog whistles. This would be the left's dog whistle. This means a lot more than it does, at least from the way that I've been able to poorly understand the concept of dog whistling. And we'll see this here. So we'll see this in a bit. So this author on Holy Wars and a Plea of Peace, he talks about the idea, kind of talking a bit rationally about the controversy that this unraveled. So the idea that people working under an ethos, then the telos has been changed and is something that no longer represents a meritocracy. And that's going to cause people who behaved under a previous ethos to feel marginalized, which is why they're wishing to pull out.
So, as kind of brought up earlier from one of the... Sorry, muted myself. So, the telos kind of like changed to become more in line with the progressive... the progressive ideals of like including space for the marginalized and making those that are on the fringes of society more comfortable by weeding out any offensive type language that might be might, I don't know, psychologically harm them in some sense. So that's the change in telos, as like away from the, I guess, quality within programming that was there before.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Okay, we've got some things from Fred. So Fred's saying, Caroline worked for GitHub before getting fired and no doubt pushed for its adoption. It's odd he dips out. So I think the use of he is because Caroline is a trans woman. So that means previously identified, well, sexually male and then switched to, okay, someone's saying no. Oh, Linus. Okay. All right. So the he there is referencing Linus. It's hard because the group chat here is really hard. All right. So okay. It's odd. So Linus dips out. They COC it up and then he's back. Why doesn't Linus just do it? So he made a statement somewhere along the lines of, I didn't want a COC, then I became a hero for people I don't like, and I don't want to be a hero more than I don't want a COC. An indirect quote, Linux GitHub is a mirror IIRC, whatever that means. COCs are largely ideological allegiance. They are rarely needed. It's used to justify political action usually. See Rod Baggs, DI from the DIE stack of Opalgate, I believe was CAE's first big scalp conspiracy theory, a sneak in a reasonable sounding document that leans progressive once in place used to justify extreme political control and actions. All right, that was a mouthful. If someone wants to make this easier to verbalize, that would be appreciated.
So I wanted to like ask about what he said there, largely used for ideological allegiance and to justify political action. So have there been instances so far of people, I guess, being fired for their political views or their unwillingness to accept probably not these specific codes of conduct? What is it? The contributor covenant code of conduct yet, but other cases like that so far in the tech community, besides like James Damore. That's the only one I'm really familiar with.
Yeah, so James Damore happened, I think it was last year, I guess. So James Damore was a Google engineer who was invited to discussion panels internal at Google about trying to increase female, the female numbers at Google to try and get more female employees. And he wrote an article to say, well, perhaps it's because it's not due to sexism, perhaps it's due to different interests, and we should cater towards this. And he wrote a memo that was kind of like a scientific paper on it. And there's a website called the Heterodox Academy. So if we search Heterodox Academy, they have a really good summary. So the Heterodox Academy is like a research institution made up of people all over the political spectrum. And if we search Google Memo, it will probably come up. So and they analyze the claims that were made for the Google Memo.
Yeah, I was just more, I don't know, it seems like he's probably one of the figureheads within the tech community of somebody standing out, kind of the I don't know, the first nail that got hammered down, at least quite publicly. I know there was some controversy about like the head of Uber, like he made some lewd jokes in a company email about some sort of company retreat, and then either got fired or stepped down. But I'm not sure if that's directly related to this, other than I don't know, political correctness trying to so there is issues with Uber. That CEO actually was forced to step down. Uber was one of the few, I guess, right-wing, or at least centrist companies. But if you're centrist, that's very hard in Silicon Valley, when they don't even consider themselves to be, they kind of view leftism as the only appropriate solution, and therefore anything outside of leftism, like that window, what's the term? The Overton window, yeah.
The Overton window has moved so far left, they consider that to be center. And it's become, we'll see this kind of play out. So in regards to instances where it has been applied or where there's been repercussions, so these are all instances. So the first one was a few years ago. They tried to get it added to, so they tried to get contributor covenant added to PHP in 2016. And the various prominent people in that community ended up writing a series, like, a lot of well-researched documents about this and about its about what's actually happening. So for instance, they start saying that, it's kind of using, like, so there's a lot of things to go. I just want to go into the grand nature of it later. So then this caused a lot of talks here. Kafkatrapping is an interesting concept. It more relates to if you are prominent. Actually, what was it? I did a few tweets on this, but I can't particularly remember. Do you remember, John, how we define Kafkatrapping? So Kafkatrapping, is from the trial. So it's this situation when, I'll read this, just the intro crime out. So good causes sometimes have bad consequences. Blacks, women, and other historical outgroups were right to demand equality before the law and full respect and liberties due to any member of our civilization. But the tactics they use to raise consciousness have sometimes veered into the creepy and pathological, borrowing the least sane features of religious evangelism. One very notable pathology is a form of argument that, reduced to essence, runs like this. Your refusal to acknowledge that you are guilty of sin, racism, sexism, homophobia, oppression, confirms that you are guilty of sin, racism, sexism, homophobia, and oppression. I've been presented with enough instances of this that I've decided to give it a name. I call this the general style of argument Kafkatrapping, and above the model A Kafka trap. In this essay, I will show that Kafka trap is a form of argument that is so fallacious and manipulative that those subjected to it are entitled to reject it based entirely on the form of argument without reference to whatever particular sin or thought crime is being alleged. I will also attempt to show that Kafka trapping is so self-destructive to the causes that employ it that change activists should root it out of their own speech and thoughts. Let me just see if I have a tweet about this. Yep.
So it's like when you see an accusation of racism against somebody, and they would go to defend themselves to say, I'm not racist, and then, I don't know, they would give whatever defense that they could think could prove their point, like they have black friends, or they're in an interracial marriage, or something like that. And no matter what you say in that instance, it's essentially I don't know, or it's taken as an admission of your own racism.
Yep. Yeah, and so it's something which undoes, for instance, due process, I guess, or even rational thinking about it, which is interesting because when we tie it into the Me Too process, it's kind of guilty until proven innocent in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I was just kind of thinking about the whole Kavanaugh situation here in America.
So there's also the same author. He's written one called, gosh, why? I've got too many windows open right now. It's really hard to figure out where these links are opening to. Okay, so he's got another one called the Kafka trap to the honey trap. And in it, he talks about a situation that may, like a anonymous informant has said this is happening to Linus. So for instance, the short version is, if you are any kind of open source leader or senior figure who is male, do not be alone with any female ever at a technical conference. Try to avoid even being alone ever, because there is a chance that a woman in tech advocacy group is going to try to collect your scalp. This is an IRC conversation portion redacted to protect my informant. Follows. I'm super careful about honey traps. For a while, that's how the Adder Initiative was trying to pre-generate outrage and collect scalps. Yeah, because the upshot is I no longer can afford to mentor women who are already in tech. I can and do mentor ones who are not in it, but are interested and able. But once one is already in, nope. The MO, not sure what MO means, was to get alone with the target and then mission objective was to get alone with the target and then immediately after cry attempted sexual assault. When the backlash comes, it's going to be vicious, and women who were not part of this bullshit will suffer for it. On the poor encourager less autres principle, I hadn't thought of that. Still damned unfortunate though. Linus is never alone at any conference. This is not because he lets fame go to his head and likes having a posse around him. They have made multiple runs at him, implied warning noted. So this can be seen, so a honey trap, for instance, is also what we see happening to what possibly has happened to the defense distributed founder who recently was using an adult dating website and apparently had sexual relations with an underage girl on an adult dating website. And that girl was collaborating with the FBI. And a warrant was out for his arrest. Then another instance is what happened to apparently Snowden as well as Assange, where both had sexual assault cases raised against them as ways of trying to get them to be extradited to the USA for punishment. Fred is now saying, did you include the
So
Drupalgate?
wait, that doesn't make any sense. Like they had these sexual assault allegations made against them, in order to like try to keep them quiet and under the thumb, and so they had to like leave the USA to a place where they would be safe. Or I'm not sure.
Well, that's the reason why Julian Assange is in the Ecuadorian embassy in the UK, because three women or so in Sweden made rape allegations against him, and that doesn't particularly, they're just allegations. But because they're allegations, he now needs to be trialed. And to be trialed, they will extradite him to the USA, where he will never see the light of day again. And that's why he's hiding out in the Ecuadorian embassy. So, for instance, like there's also the person, what is it, Silk Road? Okay, what's his name?
So Frederick brought up two more, I guess, occasions of this. I guess the fallout from this type of, I don't know, the other victims, I guess, of the situation. The Drupalgate guy, and also Lambda Conf, I'm guessing conference. I'm not sure who either of these are. Maybe you would know. Drupalgate.
Yeah. So we'll talk about them as well. So Ross Ulbricht is another person. He was the creator of the Silk Road. He was working at a cafe, and then FBI agents staged an argument in front of him to distract him, and they put a USB drive into his laptop to copy all its data. But then he was also convicted of several charges that were then dropped, and the case was found to have a lot of corruption in it. And a lot of these cases actually go to private courts, where, for instance, they go to military courts. I'm not sure if this one did, but I have seen other things where they do go to military courts, so they don't get a public hearing. It's all done in secret courts, because they're considered so high profile and whatnot, or it could be like a issue to national security and whatnot. Okay, so try to get added to Awesome Django. Let's just see what this link is about. Okay, I'm just going to have to close all the other tabs. Okay, pull request rejection. Okay, so someone here has said, hi, great project. I recommended adding the contributor covenant. This person then says, yeah, so for all the general reasons. Then he says, we don't really need it. I think it's okay. And then the person starts, making it quite political, and then starts kind of threatening him that he's going to be removed from the project, which is interesting. And then on Opalgate, so this is the biggest one. So this is actually a blog post from Coraline talking about this. And then here is, one of the accusations. But this is the pull request that she made. So Opal is a Ruby project. One of the maintainers made some statements that were against the trans movement. So Coraline says, Ilya Shito is publicly calling trans people out for not accepting reality on Twitter. His Twitter profile mentions that he is a core contributor to Opal. Is this what the other maintainers want to be reflected in the project? Will any transgender developers feel comfortable contributing? Let's see if the status is still existing. Okay, so apparently he said, I don't know enough about Italian politics to say, but if you think trans people aren't accepting reality, it's probably bullshit. Okay, so here's the earlier quote. So that's a criticism. Ilya says that, anyway, it's months that that happens. So apparently he was just talking about just some critique. This is a statement about what was actually being said. It was just some Ben Shapiro style criticism. Okay, now
so it was just like not accepting reality and like being, I don't know, having liberal ideals or something like that. Like,
well, not accepting. So it's the idea that they're not accepting. They're, I guess, delusional because they're pretending to be something that they aren't.
okay.
So the dysphoria type interpretation, and then. But then because the trans activists kind of like, say for Caroline, if you were to refer as Caroline as Corey, which was Caroline's cis identity, then that would be called dead naming. And dead naming is a thought crime to the trans movement. So you have to consider them always a woman and always were a woman. They were just unactivated yet. But even what's Bruce Jenner's new name? Caitlyn. So Caitlyn even refers to her past self as Bruce. So Caitlin's actually considering like perpetuating a thought crime there to even refer to herself as Bruce because she's dead naming. This is a concept that was raised in the research papers that I've linked at the bottom of it. But the point here is that someone makes a criticism in a public space, and then they should be pulled from the project. So from a work project. So they work on this piece of code. They then violate the contributor covenant. They can now be kicked from their project. Anyway, they ended up.
But
yeah.
Yeah, so Opal though is another open source platform, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's so strange. Like, it's an open source platform. He's a major contributor to it, but he's not like being paid like directly from Opal. It's not like he's an employee. I don't know if he makes, I don't know, whatever backends from the contributions that he makes, kind of like YouTube or I'm not sure how it works like that, but he's not like a hired employee by Opal at all.
No, I use one of the core maintainers. So like if we go to this issue and then we're talking about Elias. So Mayor raises some interesting, like this is a really interesting read, this thread, but then you'll see like a lot of the trans activist community start piling in. So what would have happened was Caroline posted this, then she shared it with her LGBTQIA plus community, and then they piled on in criticism and allegations. But if we go to contributors, we'll see Elia is probably up here. So he's the second most active contributor in this project. And actually, he's been the lead contributor since 2014.
So just from a layman's perspective, though, it's kind of like Wikipedia, where like anyone can contribute to it, but those that have more pull have better rankings, or I'm not sure. I guess either from Wikipedia either, but it's different from like him being an employee at Uber or Google, since it's not. Yeah, okay.
Well, there's no like employee protection thing. So like in a company, there's discrimination laws that can prevent you from being fired for political affiliations and whatnot. But in open source, there's none of those protections. It's just like a hobby project, right? And or at least legally, that's what it's considered. So it could be backed by a foundation, but in the end, it's a project, and you don't get the protections there. So there are maintainers who have, they're the ones who can merge things, but anyone can submit pull requests or changes, right? So the more you contribute to a project, then you'll then be considered a maintainer of the project.
So it's just a status change. It's not like a hired role or anything like that. It's just a different name for him as a contributor.
That's correct. Well, it gives him direct write permissions.
Okay. Yeah.
So when you become a maintainer, you get direct write permissions.
So that like it doesn't have to go through a process of, I don't know, other people like peer review or whatever for code.
Yeah, well, then it still depends, right? So that like generally they have this contributing thing. So a project that is quite big. I'm not sure about this project, but if we go to like Node, for instance, this is a really big project. Everything, even the core devs have to submit everything as a pull request, and then they have to be signed off, and it's a very intricate project. So they go through a checklist. Everything needs to be signed off by multiple authors.
Okay.
So, but the right means you can actually merge a pull request yourself, but it's kind of like if the processes are big, then everyone follows the same process. But in smaller projects, then the right people push directly to it. They don't really need to do a pull request. But contributors have to go via pull request first because they don't have any write access.
Okay, but so this person though who made the comments on Twitter, was it Elia?
Yeah.
Yeah. They still have maintainer status though.
Yeah, so they actually won that battle against Contributor Covenant being in, and they ended up adopting. So so it's interesting. If you read on Opalgate, Caroline concludes this with she apologizes for the way she went about it. However, in the end, they won. And
who's they?
Sorry, Caroline. In the end, Caroline considers itself to be a win because. Okay. So in the end, Adam Bainon accepted the pull request to add version 1 of the Contributor Covenant to the project. It's important, unlike version 1.3, blah, blah, blah. However, it seems this has been pulled because this is now the Contributor Covenant. This is now the code of conduct. So it may have been the case that, it was considered a win, but then...
But now they took it back.
Yeah. So, for instance, the author or the creator of the project ended up merging in the Contributor Covenant pull request without consulting anyone else. But then it seems they discussed it, and then they've gone and done this code of conduct instead.
So who would be in charge? Like, who would be the one that would be putting the code of conduct for Opal? Is that actually run by whoever started Opal, the business manager?
Yeah. So we'll see it's okay. So for instance, update Contributor Covenant to include. So these are all the pull requests that were submitted. So for instance, this was one in 2015. That was the one that was merged to add the Contributor Covenant. We'll see. And then over here, then they ended up swapping it out to a different one, I guess here. I'm not sure these are in particular order or whatnot, but maybe it bypassed the pull request thing. But generally what happens is the founder can override anyone's rules in open source communities. This is a problem of process. They shouldn't really be able to do this. It happened in Node.js many years ago. For instance, someone called, I think it was Benedict, he rejected a pull request to change documentation pronouns from he to gender neutral they. He considered it not important, and he used the definition of he that is in the dictionary, which is that one that is any person. So he in English is gender neutral, but Ben wasn't a English speaking native. So he, in his language as well as in English, which people don't know, that he is the gender neutral one. So he closed it because it would be too hard to get it reviewed. Isaac Schluter, who was the owner of Node at that point, or the head honcho, he merged it without going through the appropriate processes. This was a huge no-no. Because generally to get anything merged, it needs to be signed off by, like, say, 5 team members or so, as we would have seen with the contributor, the code of conduct. So the one that got merged to Linux, we'll see it was proposed by this person and it was signed off by all of these people.
So that's an instance where the owner, I guess, just went through to change all of the gendered language into neutral language without having the 5 people put their okay on it just because. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so that was a huge violation. Like if that was a company project, then he would have been fired. Kind of thing. Like it's a serious no-no.
Okay.
To do that. But we can see in Linux, it went through these people. They approved it. But yeah, at least in the case of Opal, the one of the people merged it directly. I guess he was the current owner at that time. But then after other review, they swapped it out with one that wasn't a contributor covenant. However, there is no mention about that on Coraline's take on this, which I found a little bit dodgy, in my opinion, to not mention, to make it out as if you've won that battle when you did it. Okay. So PHP, they also tried to get it in PHP, but PHP outright rejected it. They tried to get it added in Awesome Django. That got rejected. They tried to get it added to Opal. It was there, but then it got rejected. And they tried to get it added to LLVM. However, the guy in LLVM, he ended up saying that he's just leaving completely. He's had enough of this stuff, and he wrote this article by Quillette to consider its discrimination against other political viewpoints, which is interesting. And he's looking, I guess, at pulling his contributions. They tried to get it in SQLite, which is a recent controversy. I'll actually talk about this one.
You called it Oh, okay. I always heard it as SQLite.
Yeah, it's Australians versus Americans.
Yeah. I've noticed that quite a bit. Like you do a lot of bizarre pronunciations, but
yeah, cache versus cache, router versus router.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. So bring up the SQLite story.
Yeah. So the SQLite one I'll actually just touch on a little bit later, because this conference stuff is actually interesting. So for instance, the contributor covenant, we'll keep that one open. Actually, let me pin this, and we'll pin the contributor covenant because they're important. Because I also want to do my best at giving the contributor covenant, its credit. Where it's due, kind of thing. So the contributor covenant. So some of these things, for instance, the use of sexualized language or imagery or unwelcome sexual attention or advances, trolling derogatory comments. So in a lot of meetups, they are quite, like, for instance, there's this particular meetup in Sydney. I don't go to it. I don't like it. It's a very big boys club. They just get wasted, and they have it's just not a good time. It's like 100 people. They get wasted. They tell all these dodgy jokes. Before, they would have like women in bikinis and slides, then that was correctly raised to be like, this is completely inappropriate. Do not do this at the conference. There was a situation, so, but those are things, you just tell the person, hey, that's inappropriate, don't do it again. And they'll be like, fine, okay, right? But however, this thing happened, Donglegate. So these two guys, they were telling dongle jokes. Or like forking jokes, things like that. Like, okay, jokes about forking repos in a sexual way, so big dongles. So they're just sitting in a conference, watching a talk, making some dongle jokes, right? The girl behind them, rather than saying, hey, that's inappropriate, don't do that, she made a public tweet and then also tried to get them kicked out of the conference and fired. And they did get fired.
Whoa, where were they fired from?
Their jobs. The companies did not want to be associated with this, and they fired them.
Okay. So they were just like engineers for... Okay. Yeah, wow. So during some talk, they're making jokes to each other, and whoever this is, she or I don't know, yeah, Adria, she took a picture of them calling them out for it. And then they got fired.
Yep. But she actually actively pursued their employers to try and get them fired. And they got fired. So they worked at different companies. So Playhaven fired one of them, and SendGrid fired the other one. But however, it's so weird, right? Because you would think that this would violate this one. right? Publishing others' private information, such as physical, electronic address. Like, you would think that this would be doxing. Like, you would think that what Adria did would violate these bits, right? But that's the thing. So public and private harassment, publishing others' private information, other conduct that could reasonably consider inappropriate in a professional setting.
Yeah, it depends on if she actually doxed them. If she was taking a picture of them while they were at like a conference, that tweet by itself, that's not doxing somebody. By
2 pictures, yeah. Well, I mean, it's a private space. It's 2 pictures of people. You know they're at a conference. Like, Google did a really good talk. Like, if you watch the Google Cloud talks about what actually contributes private or personal information. So, for instance, a birthday alone isn't personal information. But then if you can merge that, like if someone posts a birth date and then someone else posts like another information, like a name, then those 2 in combination become personal. So for instance, posting this photo, fine, you know, these people can be anonymous, right? But because it's all known at this event, then now they can be tracked down, right? So therefore it does become posting personal information.
Can you like see that guy's name on his name tag from the image? I can't tell from here, but
no, but this is the thing, which is that because this information can be associated, it hasn't been anonymized. Do you see what I mean? Like, there's a fascinating, like, I'm not going to log into my YouTube account, but okay.
Do you know what the name of it was?
Yeah, so Google Cloud Anonymous. So like, for instance, Google medical data. Okay, here we go. This talk is fascinating. So this is talking about Google Cloud. Well, Google's working with medical institutions, and then what it actually requires to...
Oh, okay, so yeah, like discussing like for privacy issues and security issues. Yeah, like what information can't be leaked about somebody's like medical records. Yeah, that makes sense. But I don't know. Yeah. From that tweet alone, I don't know if she did other like actually like finding out where they worked and like calling the place and like sending other people.
But that's the thing. You don't need like one person to do everything, right?
Yeah.
Like if you,
Okay, yeah.
Like if this tweet was posted without this description and without any location information and time information, sorry, if this image was just posted on an imager, then it would be anonymous, right? Because then there's no way to then associate that information with other information. Like, it's the ability to then associate information with other information that then makes it a violation of privacy.
I don't see this as a violation of privacy. I do see a violation, I don't know, moral, I don't know, humanness for, I don't know, calling them out for something like that. But, and like I said, I don't know what other parts, what else happened besides just that singular tweet right there. Moving on. We got a comment in the chat. There's a long history of finger wagging. See prohibition. I'm not sure if he's referring to like prohibition of alcohol.
I'm not sure. But there's another one. Actually, do I mention it anywhere?
So when did Donglegate happen? Because that is, I don't know, that's the most surprising so far.
2013.
Okay.
Yeah. So this stuff has been going on quite a while. Okay, so Drupal, what was really interesting is these ones. So this is another case of like a witch hunt. So there was a person who we consist of blah, 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 blah. Okay, so a person called Dries was kicked out of the Drupal community. He was a major participant in the Drupal community. Drupal is like a CMS that's used in many websites, many enterprise sites. It probably powers like a single-digit percentage of the internet of websites.
Wow.
So Dries is a member who was pushed out of Drupal because he in his personal life he participates in like a I guess a religion, which practices master-slave relationships with women. So the women act as slaves and he acts as a master, but that's his personal life. And then
Russian Orthodoxy.
Well, it's more like they actually dress up in leather and all that things. Yeah, it's like a BDSM fetish religion or whatever. However, this letter was written, which all these major people in Drupal actually said, look, this is unacceptable. He's we say we consist of 156 great women and men, including 2 former Drupal Association board members, the CEO of a large Drupal agency who has funded Drupal development to the tune of over years of some of the largest, most well-respected Drupal agencies in Europe, blah, blah, blah. We are pro-tolerance, pro-diversity, and pro-inclusion. We believe that tolerance reserved only for people who think and act exactly like we do is no tolerance at all. We believe that diversity is more than just skin deep. And we believe that professionals can and must work together despite the diversity of pluralistic societies. We vehemently reject all forms of discrimination. No ejected, just discrimination. I'm not sure what that word means. Okay, just discrimination over what people look like on the outside, but also discrimination over what people believe, what they value, and how they lawfully, consensually, and peacefully live their personal lives. We stand for professionalism in technology. We are wholly committed to codes of conduct that ensure harassment and discrimination-free environments that maintain the highest standards in professional behavior in our communities. We reject whisper campaigns, smear campaigns, and witch hunts that are designed to destroy the reputation of professionals with details stolen from their personal lives. We reject harassment, intimidation, bullying of professionals in the name of moral crusading. And above all, we reject the extremist notion that our personal lives must be subjugated to a ideological purity test in order for us to participate in our professional communities. For more than 10 years, Drays has been inspired by your leadership. We have been inspired by your leadership of the Drupal community. You have proven your integrity, your commitment to building the greatest content management system in the world, and your skillful ability to handle the complexities of a growing worldwide ecosystem. We have trusted you as I think this is the benevolent dictator model. Yeah, benevolent dictator. So this is like the founder who takes care of a open source community. So he was the head. And we continue to trust your desire to make the best decisions for Drupal community, no matter how difficult. So Larry Garfield, a longtime veteran contributor, was ejected. It wasn't Drays that was ejected. I'm not sure. Okay, Larry Garfield, for a long time veteran contributor to Drupal, was ejected from the community, allegedly not for breaking the code of conduct, but to quote your own post on the matter, because he holds views that are in opposition with the views of the Drupal project.
Values.
This decision, values. To reach this decision, a member of the Drupal community allegedly dredged up information from non-Drupal spaces, including illegally obtaining information from member-only websites by violating the terms of use. With the full knowledge of the community working group, known Drupal members allegedly used whisper and smear campaigns, harassment, intimidation, and bullying to achieve the goal of purging Larry for his behavior in unrelated communities, completely disregarding our long-standing values of tolerance, inclusion, diversity, and anti-discrimination, anti-harassment. Many of us feel there are serious concerns around conflict of interest and transparency in the handling of this issue. We have read your recent apology to the Drupal community, and we want to assure you that we, who have worked in the community for years, know the community welcomes BDSM participants. We also read your thoughts on reforming the governance, and we feel these suggestions offer no assurances that you understand our concerns, nor guarantees that this situation will not repeat itself. Our concerns do not make us pro-Larry. We do not endorse his beliefs or his personal life, but we are passionately committed to openness, transparency, due process, fairness, inclusivity, diversity, having personal lives that are none of Drupal's business, and professionalism in tech.
Yeah, skip a bit down to where it's saying the Drupal code of conduct forbids all harassment. Yeah, okay. Larry did not violate the code of conduct and apologized to Larry. Wait. Okay, so if and only if Larry did not violate the code of conduct, then apologize to Larry. Wait, why would Larry apologize to himself?
Oh no, so they're writing all of this to Dre's. Larry's the one who participates in BDSM.
And who's Dre's?
So he's the owner of Drupal, I guess.
Oh, okay.
But
Larry, okay, so Larry still got fired, but they claim it wasn't because of his participation in his religion, but because Larry did not agree with does not agree with the values of Drupal.
Well, these are, yeah, so this is, if that is the case, then please state, right? Like, please actually state directly why, like, you know, the specific reasons he's being done.
Oh, so this is a letter addressed to Dre's for why they fired Larry?
Yeah, so I screwed up the introduction of this. So the community is writing this letter to Dre's, I guess the owner of Drupal, to then appeal that Larry was unfairly let go from the project, and that the reasons stated are currently inadequate. If Larry was fired for the BDSM stuff, then that is inappropriate because personal life should not, be involved in their professional life by the virtues of tolerance and all the rest. But if he was fired for something else, then you must state that, because right now it's ambiguous. So anyway, I'm not particularly sure what ended up happening with this. But it was really interesting. So the Drupal community actually ended up, so this happened in 2017. So this actually ended up, causing a big backlash. So this is like a few months, I guess, before James Damore was purged.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So then here's like a Hacker News discussion things. So there's a tendency here, right? Like the other thing is, the guy was doxxed, like the SJWs went for his personal life, like broke into like different accounts or, blackmailed people to try and get evidence of that. And yeah, so it's quite interesting. You start to see codes of conduct being used only for one particular aim, and that is like an ideological purity test.
So Frederick brought up another point besides Drupalgate, the Lambda conference. I'm guessing that's short for conference.
Lambda.
Do you know what that's about?
I have no idea. I'm not sure about that one.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So that happened. Okay. There's another. So on this, there's also this really interesting article, the Neurodiversity Case of Free Speech. Rod Vag tweeted this because there was tensions in the Node.js community, and he got lambasted for tweeting this article. This article is talking about how the requirement of code of conduct at universities has actually resulted in several professors who are on the autistic spectrum or Tourette's from these mental kicks to commit suicide because they cannot live. Yeah, because they cannot live with the stressful requirements that are placed on them.
That makes sense. Okay, so I'm actually currently reading through Greg Lykoff's and Jonathan Haidt's book, The Coddling of the American Mind, and it brings up a lot of these kind of instances about how, say in law school, there was several teachers that were worried about going through different rape legal cases and actually taking the different arguments with their students because of fear from kind of the ramifications from doing so, which ultimately leads to poorly educated students and poorly educated lawyers out there that aren't going to be able to actually provide the necessary assistance for people in these types of situations. It's a whole lot of, I don't know, bad ingredients all put into a large soup. So yeah, okay, so the teachers with yeah, mental handicaps aren't able to withstand the stress of having to, like watch everything that they're saying or worry about. Yeah, because like in some college campuses, there's like numbers everywhere to report some sort of bias that occurs or some sort of microaggression, or it's basically calling out anyone that might be causing some sort of, or like to say something that can be construed as offensive or threatening or anything like that. I can definitely understand the case that he's making there.
Yeah. So they also say, okay, well, it's about these mental handicaps, but it's also, for instance, just about, they even tie in personality. So people long conscientiousness is impulsive, reckless, or short-sighted speech and behavior, or even low agreeableness, which is onery, offensive, and disagreeable, violating speech codes. High openness also is high openness predicts adopting unusual beliefs and eccentric behaviors. High extroversion predicts being hypersocial, hypersexual, hyperverbal. So not only does code of conduct risk being intolerant to those of the neurodiverse, but also in terms of neurodiverse in terms of handicaps, but also neurodiverse in terms of temperament and personality. And then they also talk about even people who are on antidepressants or different drugs, for instance, will also be affected in being unable to, or becoming handicapped in their ability to comply with these behaviors. So it's a situation where the repercussions of these ambitions, these virtues, can actually have grave and horribly intolerant repercussions on people.
So why is it that this is a taboo subject? Because it's advocating for the political talking point of diversity. It's just not the diversity of skin colors, the diversity of different personalities, as well as, oh shoot, I think my computer just...
No, I've still got you.
My screen just went black. I'm not sure what that is. I'll plug it in.
Yep.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a good question. So this is when we go to the media interpretations of this. Let me just we'll save that question for later.
Okay.
So one of the other areas. So we've got the SQL stuff. Let me close everything again. And we'll go back. Okay, so conferences. This is one of the things I really wanted to kind of talk about here, which is that, this is a conference. This is a very standard set of terms for conference attendance. So if you're wanting to participate in the tech community, conferences generally have these terms. This is a real conference called Elixir Camp. Diversity and inclusion. We are striving to improve diversity and inclusion of not just the Elixir community, but the tech community as a whole in Australia. As we have a code of conduct that all camp attendees must follow, we are also developing a transparent process for dealing with violations of this code of conduct. Below, we outline some of our current initiatives. Ticketing. That's fine. Accessibility. That's fine. Prayer room quiet space. For those who wish to engage in religious activities over the course of the weekend, there will be a prayer space available to you. The space will also be open for people who wish to work in a quiet, calm environment. Gender diversity. There will be designated all female identifying and male identifying cabins. The rest of the accommodations will be on a first come, first served basis. So this is interesting. I'll talk on this right after I read the code of conduct. Code of conduct. Elixir Camp is dedicated to providing a harassment-free conference experience for everyone, regardless of gender, gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, disability, physical appearance, body size, race, age, or religion. We do not tolerate harassment of conference participants in any form. Sexual language and imagery is not appropriate for any conference venue, including talks. Conference participants violating these rules may be sanctioned or expelled from the conference without a refund at the discretion of the conference organizers. Harassment includes, but is not limited to, verbal comments that reinforce social structures of domination related to gender, gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, disability, physical appearance, body size, race, age, and religion, sexual images in public spaces, deliberate intimidation, stalking, and following, harassing photography or recording, unwelcome sexual attention, advocating for or encouraging any of the above behavior. Anyone violating these rules will be asked to leave at the discretion of the organizers. If you are a witness or a victim of harassment or non-exclusion, please contact the event organizers who will introduce themselves at the start of the event. Our strong preference is that we address any issues as and when they happen. However, you do not feel safe as when an issue arises, you may contact an organizer via SMS or phone call. Phone numbers will be provided at the start of the event. It sounds as if like you're about to enter into like a rape culture where everyone is like, you know, you're entering at like such a high risk where there's pedophiles and rapists like just stalking the hallways. Like, oh my God, like there's a police force monitoring the hallways at all time.
Yeah, okay. So, sorry, I like got out of the call for a little bit, so I wasn't able to hear all that. So this is the code of conduct just for a coding conference?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Word conference, yeah.
All right, so I guess probably the reasons for this is kind of like what you were saying before, that these conferences tend to kind of turn into a boys' club just because of most of the people that are engineers are less, let's say, sociable with women, and also, I don't know, maybe not as empathetic towards, or maybe not too like aware of.
Well, they have handicaps in the social abilities to be passionate.
Yeah, that's what makes them good engineers, is their ability to kind of disassociate from human emotions.
Now, actually, for anyone who just considers what John said there to be horrific, read this research paper, which considers gender differences and responses to moral dilemmas. It specifically says in that paper that they found males to be more rational or utilitarian in their ethics, and women to be more deontological as well. And more effective, because primarily, well, one would then assume that is due to the personality differences of agreeableness.
I think Jonathan Haidt's pointed out is like a systematic thinker, which is kind of more, if we wanted to bring in Tyler, more left hemisphere, or no, wait. Yeah, more left hemisphere. And then you have the more, what's the other term? It's not just emotionality, but that's a big part of it. Like, empathetic thinker. It's not just that. It's kind of like a holistic thinking. That's it. So there's systematic thinking, and then there's holistic thinking. Typically, like, the masculine personality is more likely to be a systematic type thinker rather than a holistic type thinker.
Yeah. And you can think of this in terms of what James Damore cited in his paper, which is that women play with dolls, men play with toys or trucks or whatnot.
And especially for a career such as engineering, where having a systematic way of thinking about the world would be a great advantage, whereas having a more holistic, more social, temperament, like where you really enjoy interacting with people and being able to empathize with them and understand them and be able to like work together with other people. It's not like, seemingly it wouldn't be a good fit for if those are your interests, or that's the type of career that you're looking for, something where you get to interact with people.
Yeah. So yeah. So for this, for the code of conduct, it's really interesting, right? Verbal comments. So harassment is considered verbal comments that reinforce social structures of domination related to gender, gender identity, and expression. What is weird here is gender fundamentally is a social structure of domination. Like anyone who is then presenting as male or woman is adopting a social structure of domination. And because there is a hierarchy of what a male and a man and a woman are meant to do in facilitating those gender roles.
Okay, so I'm not sure if that's what it's meaning by domination. I think it seems to be like using some sort of role associated with domination. So like I guess that's kind of always contextually based, where like I'm better than this other class or this other person.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm not sure what point you're making though. Like using the term male or female, you're using a term that is better than all other terms. Is that what you're?
No. So I mean, for like say your traditional nuclear family. So okay, this is my precise thoughts on it. Code of conduct seem inherently and staunchly against progress, a method for a few arrogant adults to compel their expectation of adulthood onto other adults as if they are children, by oppression, suppression, and repression. The epitome of deafness halting evolution progress.
It's the epitome, but okay.
Epitome, okay. Epitome, that makes a lot more sense. Now I know what word people are referring to. All right, community code of conduct process differs from governmental and societal conduct obligations. The government conduct is achieved representationally in a Western nation via population democracy, and societal conduct is achieved naturally via transparent liquid democracy. For instance, there will be a designated all-female identifying and male identifying cabins. The rest of the combinations will be in first-come, first-served basis. This confuses sex, chromosomes with gender social, yet compels all who attend to abide by that delusion.
So I'm not sure what that quote is referring to. There will be, is that like for...
So this is here.
Oh, okay. So this is from one of the conference room or the conference codes of conduct. Okay.
Yeah. So for instance, the way of implementing their code of conduct. So for instance, this is confusing sex, which is chromosomal or biological, with gender. However, if you were to disagree with that, then it would be considered inappropriate because it would then violate this.
So it's kind of like imposing a social construct perspective of gender onto everyone that is going to be participating.
Well, not just gender, like because gender fundamentally is considered a social construct. It's the way that sex. Well,
so it's like people that are seeking to divide themselves based off of their genitalia, their actual sex. Like the people that are only interested in sharing cabins with people that have a biological similarity within themselves.
Yeah,
it's forcing all of those people to have to instead group themselves based off of this subjective identification of each individual person.
Yeah. So, but it's just so interesting, right? Because what they should be saying is using gender terms, not sex terms here, because you can't change your sex. So it's promoting here, like there's a confusion already in here. But compels as, so for instance...
Wait. No, male and female are the gender terms, though.
No, they're not. Female is a of or denoting the sex that can bear offspring and produce eggs. Woman is the gender term.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Male is sex and man is gender.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get
Okay. So compels as harassment includes, but it's not limited to, verbal comments that reinforce social structures of domination related to gender, gender identity, expression, sexual orientation, disability, physical appearance, body size, race, and religion. Advocating for, encouraging any of the above behavior. Okay, so curiosity of people's feedback. Okay, there's also a shit. Okay, somewhere in here I posted. Okay, here we go. Arguably, gender at all is a social construct of domination. Now, I argue that because, for instance, gender, for instance, when we consider a woman and a male in terms of their gender roles, then the male's gender role assumes certain responsibilities, which is they are to dominate system spaces. So, for instance, the workplace, politics, and they are meant to be the head of the family. You think of whereas a woman is then, because of the sexual proclivities and the way that they affect temperament, then generalized into
Frederick's left.
Fred's off. All right.
Yeah.
See you, Fred.
Thanks for the comments.
And so, yeah, whereas a woman, because of their proclivities, notably the higher agreeableness, but also having a uterus which gets pregnant, then, and those proclivities, they allow that. I did a tweet recently where I talk about all the gender differences that are biological. So, for instance, women at nighttime when they're sleeping, they will generally hear babies crying, whereas men will generally hear thuds and more intruder type noises. But there's all these things. So it's just like, okay, well, the female is meant to dominate the home community environment, and the male is meant to dominate the the workplace. But when we consider this to be religious, for instance, I've lived multiple months in Asia in a majority Muslim community. And, the women wear their burqas, and, there's obligations of dominance related to that. And it's important to just bring up what domination is. Domination is the exercise of power or influence over someone or something, or the state of being so controlled. Now, there's probably, let's see if there's multiple definitions of this.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like you're. I can understand how you can use the term domination in regards to these types of things, but yeah. I'm not sure if that's the same meaning that they're meaning when they're using.
Yeah, so this is where it also seems to be fuzzy. So if I look up the actual definition of dominate, it's have power and influence over, be the most important or conspicuous person or thing in, or have a commanding position over, overlook. So for instance, in a woman in a male marriage, then the male would dominate certain areas. They will have a commanding position over and overlook certain area. They will have powers and influence over certain areas, as the female will do. However, the way that they're probably intending here is dominion, which is the word they're wanting, which is dominion, sovereignty or control, a territory or sovereign government, or, sorry, I spelled this wrong, ownership and control of property. That's probably where, you have this authoritarian control over someone.
I wonder if they would classify somebody that's just broad-shouldered and has a domineering stance, if that would be considered a reinforcing the social structure of domination.
Yeah.
So it seems like they're only relating domination according to gender identity and expression, sexual orientation. So
body size, however.
Okay.
This is such a weird
yeah. So
people who are taller, they do better.
Yeah. But even just to if you were to ask a gay man if he was a top or a bottom, would that be imposing some sort of domination, a social structure of domination regarding his sexual orientation?
Yeah. Or because it's a woman who does like to be objectified.
Yeah. So,
or a Christian housewife.
So verbal comments that reinforce social structure. Man, any verbal comments that reinforce the social structure of domination regarding to any of the, even religion. So, if you were a woman that said you were part of a traditional marriage where your husband is the head over you, that would be reinforcing the social structure of domination. Oh my God.
Now, the other thing is, it violates so many things here. It's impossible to achieve this without anarchy. And anarchy is impossible because It is the state of tribalism that then forms into a structure of hierarchy. Now, even here, when we take into the way it's implementing here, female identifying, let's just assume they mean male identifying. I mean, sorry, woman identifying and men identifying, right? Let's just assume that, you know, they're talking about gender association here. Now, how they plan on accomplishing this, while they also accomplish like a you know, inclusivity of religion, a Muslim will not sleep in the same room as like a male will not sleep in the same room as a female, and a female will not sleep in the same room as a male unless they are wed. And this is true for many cultures around the world. It's the way that it's going to, you know, I have a friend that's going to be married in India, and the males sleep in their own dorms and the women sleep in their own dorms. And that is based on sex. Now, the thing here is, like, this is really crazy. Like, it's the same thing for toiletry. Like, a Muslim will not share the same, well, you know, culturally, I should say, it's probably different for different Muslim cultures. But, you know, there's spaces that are male orientated and only female orientated. For instance, in Bali, which is Hindu, the women during menstruation are not allowed in the temples, right? So it's just like, what if that woman identifies as a man, right? Like, no, you can't, it starts to fall down. So you're gonna violate someone's sensitivities.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Okay. So
okay. Going back to that reinforcing a social. Yeah. That's only regarding harassment, though. So let's assume that in order for these verbal comments to be considered harassment, somebody would have had to have, I guess, filed a complaint or something like that. So, like, if I was to make a joking question about whether you were a gay person, gay friend was a top or a bottom, that would only be considered harassment if that person or somebody that overheard it put in a complaint about me saying that. So, gosh, dang it. But with such, like, all-encompassing language, any verbal comments that reinforce social structures of domination regarding gender identity, expression, sexual orientation, disability, physical appearance, all these things that we, like, brought up, any usage of domineering speech regarding those subjects, all it takes is somebody to raise a complaint about that in order to, get you kicked out of the conference, I guess? I guess since this is a code of conduct, I don't know, maybe you'll just get a warning at first, or depending upon how loud they are. Man. Oh, you went to pee. Okay, sexual images.
Yeah, I don't think the whole world needed to know those details.
Well, you put it in the chat. I figured, I don't know if in the chat it would be seen by the whole world. Sorry, whatever. Right, but like you had mentioned earlier, I can understand, like, some of this, like the inappropriate physical contact. Yeah, that's obvious. Like, why that shouldn't be going on. And then harassing photography or recording. Yeah, definitely. And like what you were saying before, like having scantily clad women up on the projectors, having kind of that boys club mentality around there. I can understand, like, all of that, but man, it really gives the onus of power within whoever is complaining by having such freedom for defining what is considered harassment.
Yeah. So this is, it's so interesting, right? Because, you know, I've been reading through all of these instances and just trying to find out, like, how could this inconsistency be here? And when you read through the, like, say, Coraline's blog, or, you know, the people who argue for these things, there's an overwhelming amount of arrogance in them. Like even questioning them will then be, this is feminism 101. And I'm not, like, the common response or rhetoric is, oh, okay, I've got a Medium post about this, where this was pulled on me. Let me grab it. All right, questions for anti-white male advocates. So this is one where I have series of questions about people who are pushing such affirmative action at conferences. And the, okay, Isaac has responded. And I've got, okay, if you pay me to debate you, I'm happy to negotiate rights to the content of my side of the argument. So I'm trying to, you know, find out where he's coming from, and he's saying, well, if you pay me to debate you, then I'm happy to. As you know, I'm generally in favor of open source material. Okay, blah, blah, blah. But there's like, where's the 101 thing? 101. All right, here we go. As the nature of most of these questions belies the deep lack of understanding of some of the very basic 101 level inclusion privilege principles, we'd have to start quite ways back, right? And he's feeling bad. So actually, yeah, sounds.
What was he responding to? I forget. What was it that?
So he made some questions saying that they're specifically targeting non-white males because they want to reach out by those typically held back by patriarchy and white supremacy. So for instance, and then these are my questions, like, how do you define these things? How do you plan to do this? How do you take into the cultural issues? How do you take into all the inconsistencies? And I get back, this is 101 level. You know, these questions belies a deep lack of understanding and some very basic 101 level inclusion privilege principles. We'd have to start quite a ways back from where you're choosing to plant your argumentative flag to make any progress. I'm not interested in doing that work for free. It devalues the process and thus robs us both. So you need to pay me to hear my arguments, and your entire way of thinking about this is incorrect. We need to start so far back that perhaps even Western rational ways of thinking are incorrect, at least from what I can tell.
Well, that's good. I like that. This is the kind of stuff I get into all the time with debates on this kind of stuff. I got into a debate on this on Reddit recently, where there's this whole thing about a woman being approached by a guy in Starbucks and she didn't like it. And, you know, everyone was rushing to her defense. And I made the questionable decision of saying, okay, what exactly are the rules? And got into this long thread about, like, where I was like, can we define what the rules are? Can you approach a woman? Where? When? How? Under what circumstances? It's just, you're trying to make this coherent, and they can't make it coherent because it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It drives me insane. And there's nothing wrong with any of the questions you're asking. These are all rational questions to me. Apparently reason itself is a problem or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, so as I've been reading into this, you know, I did research about these people. So for instance, Coraline, when she worked at GitHub, she's done this post about her experience at GitHub. And it's a horrific experience, like from her perspective. It is a horrible experience of things that have happened to her. And she takes out virtues of GitHub and then how she feels those were violated. And she did this public letter. In my opinion, you know, I take my stances from, you know, I try my best to adopt Napoleon Hill's beliefs on engagement, which is publicly compliment and privately criticize. However, a common theme with SOWs is they publicly criticize, and they do so in ways where comments are disabled. So yeah, so there is some clarifications and things, but I get it. Like, you know, so for instance, she felt as if things were set up against her, and then she had a personal issue. One of her friends was suicidal. She then works to, you know, that then causes her to have a mental breakdown. And then because she could not perform at work to the requirements that GitHub needed, she got fired. And then she decided that, well, the workplace is not catering to her well enough. So then she wrote this article, The Post-Meritocracy Manifesto. Meritocracy is a founding principle of the open source movement, and the ideal of meritocracy is perpetuated throughout our field in the way people are recruited, hired, retained, promoted, and valued. But meritocracy has consistently shown itself to mainly benefit those with privilege, to the exclusion of underrepresented people in technology. The idea of merit is in fact never clearly defined. Rather, it seems to be a form of recognition and acknowledgement that this person is valuable insofar as they are like me. If you're not familiar with the criticisms of meritocracy, please refer to resources on this page. What page is this? Okay, so these are some different posts about it.
Well,
Is this written by Corleen as well?
Yeah, correct.
Could I form a proposition that there are potentially many pages that are critiquing meritocracy, and that this particular page has been linked to because in the subjective view of the person writing this page, they found it to be the best representation? So it's the most meritocracy. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, so she's argues here, so for instance, we do not believe that our value as human beings is intrinsically tied to our value as knowledge workers. Our professions do not define us. We are more than the work we do. We believe that interpersonal skills are at least as important as technical skills. We can add the most value as professionals by drawing on the diversity of our identities, backgrounds, experiences, and perspective. Homogeneity is an
when you look at this, are these actually rejections of meritocracy, or are they just redefining what we should view as merit?
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, we add the most values by professionals by drawing on diversity. Well, isn't that in some sense an appeal to merit? We will get the best results by drawing on diversity. That's a isn't that a meritocratic position in some sense?
That's true, right? And I mean, that's one of the popular arguments that is used, which is a diverse workforce produces better results. And companies that have a diverse workforce do better than non-diverse workforce. I engage, like, those are common arguments that are placed. Now, I tried to look into that because it could just mean, and I've got a Twitter argument somewhere if someone searches for it about this, which is, well, that can just be correlation and there can be so many scientific flaws with that conclusion, because does that, like, which came before, like, did the horse come before the cart there? Because what seems to be there is, well, you would then think, okay, unless you are a large scale company, which can then attract global talent, right? Then you will be drawing from a local pool of employees, and your local environment is going to be homogenous. So
and there's a proposition here also for developing new pools of talent that don't exist. So let's take the proposition that the pools of talent we're drawing from, the most meritocratic content at this particular point is distributed in a particular way. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it should or necessarily is that way. Maybe there's pools of talent that are just underserved. So it would be in our interest to try to develop new pools of merit-based talent. It's like, well, this is an underserved market. We could go serve and try to develop merit there. That might be good.
Yeah, so this is actually the exact argument that James Damore made that got him fired for perpetuating gender stereotypes. That was the reason he was fired. Because again, they're wanting exactly what has been, communicated so far in these different things, which is they want to destroy the concepts of social structures of domination, which includes gender, which is interesting. And I'll get on. Yep.
I was just thinking, you can make a very coherent case that a business's sole objective should not just be purely profit. And there should be other things. So it's like, okay, you get to define what your values are. You can have other values. You should take care of your community. You should give back, whatever. But it's like, once you define those values, there's ways of exploring that.
Yeah. So, go, John.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so these are such valid points that both of you are raising.
We can be successful while living rich, full lives. Okay, that's an appeal to work-life balance. That's
Yep.
a sensible position.
Yeah.
But this
And
is
same here, like all of these things. Yeah.
Now the question is whether or not these values, these new principles, are supposed to be adopted by the company that you're working within, or are these supposed to be personal principles that you yourself as an individual are supposed to adopt, and like you have the personal responsibility to, like, I don't know, treat yourself as a more worthwhile human being than just a work slave for whatever company you're working at? Is it the responsibility of the company that you're working at to treat you with these core values and principles, or is it something that you're supposed to, I don't know, take up upon yourself to?
It might very well be in the interest of the company. You know, you'll improve. I mean, you might improve morale. You might improve retention. You know, you don't burn out your people as much, so they're able to work more coherently. I mean, there's a lot of potential benefits to the company to adopting these principles. It's like, well, maybe we shouldn't run people to the absolute wall. Maybe we should be a little bit better because we'll actually get more out of them if we demand less. I mean, that's possible. This could be on like a curve issue. So, you know.
Yeah. And it's so interesting, right? Because when I found this document first, and I found it and I read through it, and I'm like, this is great. A lot of these issues I personally suffered from. Like, I think most, even in the white male camps, like, have suffered from these things because, and I'll expand on that point some more. But if we look at my company or community now that I set up back in 2011, Beverly, we are an open company and community united by our shared value of open collaboration, empowering everyone in this world to create the change they wish to see, right? And it's like, here, enable us all to work on what we love, share it with the entire world, and have a great life. If we go to my website as well, these are my goals. I wish to see everyone enabled to do what they love, share the love with the entire world, and live well.
Right. But you could have a goal of, I want to make all the money, but you didn't because you have other priorities.
Yep. So it's so interesting, and it's quite interesting.
I'm going to full-blown devil advocate on this page we were looking at earlier, and I'm going to forward the proposition that each of these statements is a view that could be considered on its merits, or something, because apparently we're anti-meritocratic, but we could consider it as a proposition. Let's consider it as a proposition. So it's like, okay, we'll consider the proposition we have an ethical obligation to treat people a certain way. It's like, well, we'll consider the proposition we have make room for people who are not like us. It's like, well, that's if we're going to be truly people of ideas, as we hold ourselves out to be, it's like, well, we can consider these propositions and consider them against other propositions. And you know, so these are perhaps principles that are worthy of consideration.
Yeah. Yeah, the post-meritocracy memo has a bad title, but maybe it's intentionally there for.
It's like, yeah, I want to be coherent. It's like, if we're going to put forward the proposition, it's like, okay, let's test that proposition. Let's put it to the wall. What happens if we maximize the proposition? Do we run into problems? If so, it's like, what other propositions? How do we balance them out? So we come in with a coherent perspective. And it's like, you know, that's what we should do. But it's like when you're reading some of the other stuff where it's like, oh, we're against this. I'm like, it's incoherent because you raised all these very valid questions. It's like, I've got 18,000 questions for you that appears like you haven't thought this through, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, just, you should know 101. I'm like, no, it just does. It's not coherent. You know, it needs to be a part of a coherent thought.
Yeah. And yeah, so.
And it's like Me Too thing. It's like, what are the rules? It's like, you know, we all want to know the rules, or what, you know.
Yeah. So if we go, so it all ties together fairly nicely. So this one, the reason I came across this, well, one is I came across it from just naturally. I found it and I was just like, oh, I agree with these things. And then I noticed. Sorry?
It's bad framing.
Yeah. Now, the next thing is this name, one of the signatories. This is Linus Torvalds' daughter. Linus Torvald, before his creator of Linux. So this is a more recent creation. So this seems like Linus could be getting tied in through his daughter into the SJW scene.
And this is her signature on the post-meritocracy manifesto.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Coraline wrote this in response to her treatment at GitHub, and her treatment at GitHub was quite horrible. But again, so this is for just to tie into this hiring issue. For instance, you are so James Damore, he raises, well, there is a gender gap in engineering in tech companies, in the hard sciences as well. So how do you rectify that? One is you can consider, like, okay, you've also, as a company, which wants to earn more money, right? Like, wants to perpetuate your company. And as a tech company, you have infinite scale. The only thing that is limiting you is your ability to scale your company at the rate that your product can scale. So you need to hire more workforce. Now, if you've already maximized all the males you can hire, right, then you need to approach other demographics. Now, is the reason that women aren't in, so you want to target women. Now, if you want to target women, which are this, like 30% of women, like the gender gap, I guess, is like 10 or 20% or 30% between men and women in engineering, and companies release the stats on that. So women are the most obvious next step to target to get more workforce. However, you can then choose to think this gap is caused by sexism, which is the idea that is promoted through grievance studies, or you can choose to think this is the idea of biological or nature-driven things. However, Damore got fired because he was saying, well, maybe we should, make our workplace more applicable to women, which is largely, this is what most tech, of the diverse tech companies have done, which is they've made, you can bring in pets to work, or you can work from home, you can have more flexible working hours.
Post-meritocracy thing, not exactly along the same line. Now, it's not appealing to women per se,
yeah,
but it's basically the exact same thought. It's like our way that we're currently doing business is not furthering our goals of getting the right kind of people or the right kind of mix. So this is essentially at its core a James Damore memo. It's like, let's change the way we do business. And if we do, we will get the kind of people that we want, because this is a more important priority. So
yeah,
what's the difference?
Well, the difference is, so here's where it gets really interesting, right? So I've been trying to think, about their focus on gender and why gender identity is such a protected class. This is a very common article used in these circles, cited. Kyriarchy.
Yeah, it's probably hierarchy.
Hierarchy. With that.
Is in feminist theory a social system or a set of connecting social systems built around domination, oppression, and submission.
It sounds somewhat anti-Semitic, personally.
The word was coined by Elizabeth Schussler, Fiorenza in 1992 to describe her theory of describe her theory of interconnected, interacting, and self-extending systems of domination and submission, in which a single individual might be oppressed in some relationships and privileged in others. It is an intersectional extension of the idea of patriarchy beyond gender. Hierarchy encompasses sexism, racism, speciesism, homophobia, classism, economic injustice, colonialism, militarism, ethnocentrism, anthropocentrism, and other forms of dominating hierarchies in which the subordination of one person or group to another is internalized and institutionalized. So the focus here is so interesting, like this patriarchy, right? Like it all boils down to like this, all these ways of grievances, ways you can be grievanced or oppressed, but one of them is patriarchy. Now, it's so interesting, right? Because when, we've studied Peterson, and patriarchy is a system of order. It is imploring order onto the world. And, chaos or the feminine is then considered anarchy. And it's interesting because any form of patriarchy, any form of order is a system of domination, oppression, and submission. To have a civil society, you then repress yourself by social conventions to the nation's patriarchy. It's really interesting. But to tie this into gender theory, I was wondering about why is it? So gig feminism is like Wikipedia, but for feminists in the tech industry. This is like the what would you call it? What would you call it? Not manifesto.
The front
no,
page.
like not the front page, but like the repository of their initiatives and actions and kind of thing, like they go-to source, right? Like they consider this, I guess, more accurate than Wikipedia. So for instance, like it's constantly cited when you debate with these people. So
kind
okay,
of like National Wiki for atheists.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, so yeah, Linus's daughter signed the post-meritocracy. Okay, so the thing I figured out a few weeks ago and I talked about it was that one of the reasons I think that they're so arrogant when it comes to like transphobia is a disagreement with trans activism, like against the trans agenda. It's not you're afraid of trans people. It is you disagree with trans activism. Like if you go to Wikipedia for transphobia, transphobia is a range of negative attitudes, feelings, or actions towards transgender or transsexual people or transsexuality. Transphobia can be, okay, blah, 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 discussed, you're not conform to society's. It's often expressed along homophobic views and hence is often considered an aspect of homophobia. Homophobia is a type of prejudice and discrimination. Transgender, okay. So this one is doing a different definition than what is particularly used. Let's see what geek feminism says.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, transphobia is a range of negative attitudes and irrational feelings towards transsexuality or transsexual or transgender people based on the gender expression. Transphobic people generally express or feel emotional. Okay, so it's very similar.
So irrational is now added to the beginning of it. So there's an implicit already like wrong thing associated with it. I don't know if that was there within the standard wiki.
Yeah, but it's interesting because, well, irrational would be like the phobia type, like people who have an irrational fear of elevators, so then have a, what is it, agoraphobia?
For elevators, it's agoraphobia is fear of like crowded spaces.
Okay,
for an elevator, it's claustrophobia.
Okay, claustrophobia, right? Mm-hmm. So those are irrational feelings, but this negative attitudes, right? And also irrational feelings, but transgenderism is just like these are social practices, right? And if you get these into identity things, then it's interesting, but what I was trying to figure out is like you can't argue against them because then you're being transphobic. That is often what is said. That is what, for instance, happened to the Opalgate controversy. The person said some things about, calling it gender dysphoria, and he was called transphobic. Maintainer should be removed from the project for discussing these things. And it's just such arrogance. Like they should be kicked out. And I wonder about this because I tried to like read through her blog post and ended up thinking like, okay, if gender is a social construct, then the onus is then on society to change rather than for you to change, like, for you to fix yourself, right? So if it's then on society, then they can, there's no end point to this. They can always just keep, I think we actually have this better phrased in our meeting notes.
Well, the no end point is exactly right? This is the classic conservative liberal split. It's like conservatives like borders of all kinds. It's compartmentalization.
Yeah.
So I have to say, as a more right-leaning person, it's like this kind of stuff drives me insane because I'm like, I'm trying to compartmentalize this stuff and it's not letting me do that, which is really odd because this is all computer science people. Computer science is very logical framed, and so it's weird contrast.
Well, this is one of the things, which is the science aspect of computer science is well phrased. However, most women enter into tech companies into the HR department. They don't enter into engineering roles.
Well, the people
And
who are
they,
contributing to GitHub
yeah,
are all engineers of one kind or another, right?
yeah, it's true. However, open source, for instance, like GitHub, they did a survey. GitHub did a survey just to, like a census survey, but for GitHub people. And what they found was 95% of the respondents were male. I'm not actually sure what GitHub users are, but at least those who responded to the thing. So in open source, there's a huge disparity in the people.
Well,
Hey, Ben, I accidentally muted you. I'm sorry. I heard buzzing. I wasn't sure who it was, and I thought it would.
Yeah,
mute
it's
it
not
to-
me. I hear the buzzing too, but it's not me.
Is it you, Kurt?
I don't hear anything.
Yeah, let's meet Kurt. Is
No,
it
it's
John?
still going. Maybe not.
What? All right, it's
All right,
I don't know
whatever.
who it is. Yeah, okay, people just got to put up with the buzzing, I guess.
Yeah.
But okay, what was I saying? Yeah, okay, let me find these tweets that I did. Search advanced. What was the keyword that I used? I think, okay, strength would be one of them. Okay. Alrighty. Okay, just because I was kind of, okay. What the hell was that responding to? Oh, they've deleted the original tweet. What the hell was this in response to? Oh, maybe they just blocked me. Could be the case.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Well, is that their reply
Yeah,
directly?
okay, yeah, they blocked. So it was an original tweet, which okay, that one's
yeah.
unrelated. Okay, latest. Okay, here we go.
Something
This
to
is
do
the
with
thing.
like, yeah, the strength of diversity within a company. Is that the one you were looking for, or something different now?
Yeah. It's no, it's about open source. Like I mentioned this. Where was it? I was mentioning open source. Oh, okay. I know where it is. Tweets. It was about the 1%. No, okay, $1. $1. Here we go. Okay. So here we go. So you would think that an open source community that has 29 million downloads a month, which is the community I manage, we get more than $1 a month in donations, but that is the reality of it, and it reveals a lot of uncomfortable insights. The facets of community-driven open source are: it is done in people's spare time. It is not paid work. So why do people do it? Intrinsic motivation. It solves their own itch. And extrinsic motivation, reputation, skill gains to hopefully gain indirect higher wages. So the meritocracy reward scheme. These economics leaves an incentive reward scheme of sacrificial utilitarian meritocracy, which satisfies men more than women due to sexual selection. Men's ability to reproduce is determined by the hypergamy performance and moral aptitudes, rational over effective. Women seem better catered to by company-driven open source, be it full-time or paid personal time, which offers stable income, free time for work-life family balance, and guarantee of inclusion, erring on compassion over merit, e.g. paid maternity leave and healthcare. Like this is saying, well, there's non-sexist reasons for why this is the case. Again, I'm tempted to think that if one cannot imagine the reasoning for something without invoking inferiority or superiority, so sexism or racism, then they haven't done enough imagination. Inferiority and superiority are generally outputs of a system, rarely the inputs. Take, for instance, the differences of upper body strength of the sexes. This appears a result of the disposable nature of males, due to the low reproductive value of not having gestational uteruses. As such, they can be disposable in the service of protecting uteruses. This leads to such outputs as males dominating physical fields, males hear intruder noises over babies crying, women's tears causing men to become submissive, males filling industries of high fatalities, why we react more strongly to violence against women over men. So there's biological arguments to be made for this disparity in open source. But it's kind of like this, but then we get into, there's a fascinating article here, which is a post meritocracy. Okay, here we go. So this article, let me close some more tabs. So this article by Quillette is a progressive journalist who then is trying to understand the alt-right's arguments. And in it, she eventually says, okay, they do have valid arguments that are based in science and seem to be correct. However, it doesn't comply with my values. And we need to think how we can, as liberals, adapt to this data.
This is kind of like what Steven Pinker was talking about, how if the left is not going to be talking about it, then the only people that are going to be talking about it are people that are going to be using this information to garner their political endeavors. So the alt-right, they're going to be talking about race and IQ.
Yeah. So she says, my value system suggests that we need to replace meritocracy with a just society, although rigid genetic castes will not come into being. Social mobility creates genetic inequality, which leads to an inherent inequality of opportunity. That is, children dealt a lucky genetic hand have a better chance of doing well at school and getting a better job and making more money. This inequality in outcome is not going to be tackled indirectly through the educational system. As mentioned, if all children were taught exactly the same, the genetic differences would still lead to differences in their achievement, which would lead to differences in occupational outcomes. Again, economic inequality could be dealt with directly through a redistributive tax system that reduces the gap between rich and poor. I think people are more concerned with fairness in a just society than with economic inequality per se. It seems unfair that 60% of the increase in US national income in the last 3 decades went to just the top 1% of earners, primarily due to soaring salaries to the top end of the pay scale. However, I would argue that more important than the relative inequality of income for this top 1% is the absolute inequality of the bottom third, whose debts exceed their assets. Equality of opportunity, income inequality, and social mobility are the sort of most critical issues in society today. They are hugely complicated topics that heavily depend on values. My objective has been to look at how these issues through the single lens of genetics to show how DNA makes us who we are. However, no specific policies necessarily follow from genetic findings because policies depend on values. My values, not my science, lead me away from meritocracy towards a just society. Now, it's very important we read this beginning bits because it was a key piece to me understanding something that I think even Jordan Peterson misses. Jordan B. Peterson, he says many times in interviews, he's not for equal outcomes, he's for equal opportunity. However, he may want to reconsider this. If schools, parenting, and our life experiences do not change who we are, what does this mean for society, especially for equality of opportunity and meritocracy? In particular, does it mean that the genetically rich will get richer and the poorer poorer? Are genetic castes inevitable? What does this say about inequality? These questions have been bound up in the topic of meritocracy, which is not the same thing as equal opportunity. Equal opportunity means that people are treated similarly. For example, everyone is given equal access to educational resources. Meritocracy only comes in when there is selection, for example, for education and employment. Meritocracy means that selection is based on capability and competence rather than unfair criteria such as wealth, prejudice, or arbitrariness. Although meritocracy sounds like an irresistibly good idea, both parts of the neologism, meritocracy are loaded with unpalatable connotations. The noun merit refers to ability and effort, but it also connotes value and worth. It is derived from the Latin word meritum, meaning worthy of praise. The ocracy part of meritocracy refers to power and governance. Putting these two components of meritocracy together with genetics implies that we are governed by a genetic elite whose status is justified by their ability and effort. Instead, it could be argued that people who got lucky by drawing a good genetic hand do not merit anything. The luck at learning easily and getting satisfying jobs is its own reward. And who says we should be governed by genetic elites? The popular strain of politics around the world suggests a desire for the opposite. That is one hell of an assumption right there. 3 findings from genetic research. 3 of the main findings from genetic research transform how we think about equality of opportunity and meritocracy. These findings are about heritability, non-shared environment, and the nature of nurture. In summary, genetics provides most of the systematic variation between us. Environmental effects are random, and our chosen environments show genetic influence. These findings have different implications for equal opportunity and meritocracy. At first glance, genetics seems antithetical to equality of opportunity, violating the principle enshrined in the second sentence of the 1776 United States Declaration of Independence that all people are created equal. However, the American founders did not mean that all people are created identical. They were referring to unalienable rights, which include life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In less lofty terms, this means equal protection before the law and equal opportunity. But does not mean identical. If everyone were identical, there would be no need to worry about equal rights or equal opportunity. The essence of democracy is that people are treated fairly despite the differences. The most important point about equality of opportunity from a genetic perspective is that equality of opportunity does not translate to equality of outcome. If educational opportunities were the same for all children, would their outcomes be the same in terms of school achievement? The answer is clearly no, because even if environmental differences were eliminated, genetic differences would remain. What follows from this point is one of the most extraordinary implications of genetics. Instead of genetics being antithetical to equal opportunity, heritability of outcomes can be seen as an index of equality of opportunity. Equal opportunity means that environmental advantages and disadvantages such as privilege and prejudice have little effect on outcomes. Individual differences in outcomes that remain after systematic environmental biases are diminished to a great extent due to genetic differences. In this way, greater educational quality of opportunity results greater heritability on school achievement. The higher the heritability of school achievement, the less the impact of environmental advantages. If nothing but environmental differences were important, heritability would be 0. Finding that heritability of school achievement is higher than for most trades, about 60% in Western countries, suggests there is a substantial equality of opportunity. Oh, come on. Where's the other bit? But so she argues in here. The concept is only relevant. Okay, in contrast to equal opportunity, the concept of meritocracy is relevant only when there is selection, for example, selecting children into certain schools. At the level of primary school in the UK, there is little selection because most parents send their children to local school. Equal opportunity in this case means the children at different schools receive equally good education. Selection becomes more of an issue be at the level of secondary school. Students vie to get into the best secondary schools, which leads to selection. The issue of meritocracy is about the extent to which selection is based on merit, in this case on the student's ability, prior achievement, and other predictors of success. So the argument that Elise is presented in here derives debate and social mentality. Okay, a second way to avoid fatalism is to deny the value system that drives the debate about meritocracy and social mobility. It assumes that the point of education is to get better test scores in order to get a better occupation, that the point of an occupation is to achieve high status and makes lots of money. Another way of looking at education is as a time to learn basic skills and to learn how to learn to enjoy learning. It is a decade of the lives when children can find out what they like to do and what they are good at doing, where they can find their genetic selves and which may not dispose them towards higher education. Everyone should be given the chance to learn at school, but not everyone will choose or can afford to go on to university. So when we tie this into conclusion, the theme that I got from reading this whole article was one is that the education system, equal opportunity, what you then consider to be something that you desire for equal opportunity then becomes a right. So a right to education. And therefore it now must be an equal access through that door. Now, with school testing, for instance, the testing of the best students will go to the best universities. That's an implicit case of meritocracy, which liberal values are against because they consider it to be unfair and tends to go to the nature determinism, things they associate with racism, like justifications for racism and sexism, the things that perpetuate gender stereotypes or racial divides and things like that, or different types of injustices. As such, they want to tear down meritocracy because they consider it directly against equal opportunity. They want equal opportunity as everyone has access to the best education, where they get rid of selection criteria. They flatten the hierarchy. And that is the idea of eliminating social structures of domination, or just to flatten hierarchies and go to a more anarchist rule. But it's interesting because she's saying, well, we need to actually revise this because our values do not align with the genetic data, and we can't change people's genetics. But that's why the book Brave New World is so damn interesting, because that one is just like, hey, let's just change people's genetics and get a just society. So
okay, so the problem is that from our wide range of our population, we don't have the right, let's say, not everyone is going to be able to be well educated and then having some sort of higher class job. In fact, there's a lot of people that aren't going to be sufficient enough to get those types of jobs. And so there needs to be spaces for these other people, and not like spaces of subordination to those that were genetically gifted enough to get those higher class jobs, but somewhere where they are just as valuable to us as a society than those than the Elon Musks of the world, or the Steve Jobs and the Bill Gates, those that have been able to gain much and then gain even more from that. There needs to be some sort of system for the people that don't have that capacity to where they are still a valuable member of society.
So I think it's interesting here to tie in the upcoming Twitter code of conduct here.
Yeah, we should probably try to wrap it up because it's already been over 2 hours.
Yeah. Well, we got
I had a question before I leave.
General discussion happening in 20 minutes. So, Sumit.
Okay, I'll be traveling, so I'll just ask the question now. So sorry for interrupting. So my question was that let's just say I'm at work and I'm talking to other people, right? So we do talk about a lot of things that might be offensive and play jokes on people and troll them. And I'm not sure if that is good or bad. It's just what we do. It makes people laugh. But if you implement this kind of code of conduct, wouldn't you create a situation where you would only talk about just work-related technical stuff, and that cannot be against the code of conduct, and you'll just do the job and get out of there? And that's the first question. The second part of question would be, in a highly technical community where people are mostly interested into the tech itself, so in that situation, I assume they already only discuss about the technology and get the work done and get out. So how then it is possible for them to break the code of conduct? So that's my question.
Oh yeah, it's a great question. I'll cover this with the SQLite things. Let me just tie in this Twitter code of conduct. So Twitter have recently announced they're going to be introducing a new code of conduct.
Sorry, I wanted to say something. Just I don't know, a real quick thing. I find it interesting that, like we've brought up before, how in a higher male populated field, you're going to get more of that boys club mentality. And like what Sumit was talking about, the men will have more crass jokes and I don't know, a more, you could classify it as toxic masculinity, but it's the just air of masculinity that is more, I don't know, more comfortable for the men in that job. Then on the other side, you have not just women, but the more feminine temperament.
Sorry, my alarm's going off.
Yeah. The more feminine temperament that is attempting to make their workspace into more of a family environment where there is inclusion and shared identity between each other, a sense of safety and comfort within everywhere. So it's women trying to shape the space into what is better suited to themselves as well. And it, I don't know. I guess just bringing up how, yeah, there's a tension there for sure.
Yeah. So okay, let me try and wrap this up in 15 minutes, which will be quite the feat. So Twitter's dehumanization policy. You may not dehumanize anyone based on membership in an identifiable group, as this speech can lead to offline harm. It seems they're actually changing this. This has been updated since they originally posted it.
Is that why the NPC memes have been deleted from Twitter, or the NPC accounts?
Maybe. Why there's a whole bunch of groups that are fighting against this right now.
Yeah, because that was the leftist critiques of those, was because they were dehumanizing.
Yeah, so it's how do you define dehumanization? Language that treats others as less than human. Dehumanization okay, that's bad, sure. Dehumanization can occur when others are denied of human qualities, animalistic dehumanization, or when others are denied of their human nature, mechanistic dehumanization. Examples can include comparing groups to animals and viruses, animalistic, or reducing groups as a tool for some other purposes. This tool is interesting. I think that's been added. Now, identifiable group, any group of people that, say gender identity, religious, blah, 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 blah. Mechanistic, this is interesting. Mechanism is nature determinism, relating to theories which explain phenomena in purely physical or deterministic terms, which is different than behaviorism or behavioristic, which is nurture determinism. So we will see. My feedback to the policy. How can the dehumanization policy be improved, if at all? Banning mechanism, nature determinism, what led Nazis to kill millions, is just as silly as banning behaviorism, nurture determinism, what led Soviets to kill millions. Our biology influences our character, hence why psychiatrists prescribe drugs, just as our environment does, hence why psychologists do therapy. To deny either is to enable fantasy. Now, are there any examples of speech that contributes to a healthy conversation but may violate this policy? You'll see there's 3 replies here. They've shadow banned the other ones. So let's also view the shadow banned. Okay, that's someone's thing. So that biology such as ethnicity, gender, okay, so something that is banned would be that biology such as ethnicity and gender influences hormones such as testosterone, estrogen, cortisol, dopamine, oxytocin that influence personality and values. So Dr. Helen Fisher, she has research about this, that influence perception and politics. And that's also something that put Peterson on the map, that influence culture, right? So ethnical differences cause also differences in these hormones that also influence personality and values, which also then influences culture. James Damore's Google memo is another one. That's a shadow banned tweet, apparently. Yep. This one, another shadow banned, which is a link to the YouTube video where they talk about grievance studies, which I think this video may have been taken down. Yeah. So one of these sources here is of grievance studies. Here, academic grievance studies and the corruption of scholarship. This is well worth a read. It's impossible to go over this in the remaining 10 minutes. But these are 3 professors who started infiltrating the sociology departments and publishing sociology papers that had bad science. They were not scientific, and yet they got approved in some of the best peer-reviewed journals of those fields.
Yeah.
And the concern with there is, well, fundamentally, the sociology departments are no longer scientific. They are just purely ideological. And this is bad because it means you can no longer trust peer-reviewed papers. And peer-reviewed papers are important because it is what journalists, lawyers, scientists, and everything else base their research on, and eventually trickle down into culture. These things are very interesting. They're worth checking out. Okay. So media, okay, that's some media things.
Want to go to SQL?
Yeah. So SQLite, SQLite. All right. So what happened most recently is okay. Yeah. SQLite. Okay. So as of a few weeks ago, SQLite, they recently adopted a code of conduct. You will see it archived here. They adopted the rule of Saint Benedict, which, or chapter 4 of the rule of Saint Benedict. The rule of Saint Benedict, we will find, is as Wikipedia says, let me pull up the Wikipedia source, the rule of Saint Benedict has been successful for 1,500 years in fostering individual autonomous communities that self-govern. You'll find all the details here. So the author, he decided, okay, we now need a code. This is going to answer your question, Sumit. So SQLite was being pressured by companies that are clients or companies they need to work with. They didn't name any of these companies, but companies now require projects that they use to adopt a code of conduct. It's not okay to just say we just care about the tech and not have a code of conduct, because now to be used by companies or to have relationship with companies that are infected by this cult, and I'm going to expand on that terminology, you need to be part of that cult. So they then said, we now need a code of conduct to qualify the partnership with their project being used now by these companies. And they said, okay, well, let's search history and search literature. They considered secular sources and they considered this one. So they adopted this. Yeah.
Okay.
So they adopted the rule of Saint Benedict. This then absolutely exploded for some reason. That was considered very problematic. For instance, here, this is a popular activist who is criticizing it, because also for the particular reason here, because it's unenforceable. It's a right-wing code of conduct. It promotes conduct from the individual. It expects the individual to adopt behaviors. It's not one about enforcement, which is a left wing. So I talk here, which is collective, and so SQLite has adopted, okay, blah, blah, blah. Collective enforce. So the person says, the reason this code of conduct is bad is because it's largely unenforceable, which means it's not a code of conduct in any meaningful way, but at best a statement of value or intention. So it misses the point of code of conduct as well as sending a message. However, that's a moot point. It's been used for 1,500 years in fostering individual autonomous communities that self-govern. Now, collective force.
I think that tweet is really telling about what the purpose of a code of conduct is. It's a method for enforcement. Because okay, so like if there is a set of rules and that are vague enough, you can, if somebody witnesses you breaking those rules, they can go to somebody higher up than you and complain enough to get you fired or something like that. And it's very much a retreat to authority in order to enforce social rules, as opposed to an appeal to, I don't know, individual responsibility, or even like bringing up Jonathan Haidt again. He brought up how most children in colleges nowadays haven't been raised to be able to play amongst themselves. Anytime there is a predicament, there's always some adult or parent or teacher or law enforcement, someone nearby that you can resort to in order to essentially get your way, or at least to resolve issues that arise. There's no more mutual interactive play that's going on, where people can resolve their issues amongst themselves. It's always an appeal to whatever authority is there.
Yeah.
If there's not an authority, or if there's no method for appealing to that to some sort of authority, then yeah, there's no way for at least these types of people to enforce their social rules, because they can't interact from a peer-to-peer basis, it seems.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because in Maps of Meaning, Peterson goes over the developmental stages. So for instance, a child requires parental protection for everything. Then an adolescent is then group protection. And then an adult is individual protection. They can now protect themselves. So you think about this in terms of a baby cannot protect itself from anything, the parents must protect it. Then as an adolescent, then you distance yourself from the parent and you're trying to gain your own ability to protect yourself, but you depend on your group associations for your protection. But then the goal is adulthood. And adulthood is when you can protect yourself, which is then the realm of civility over tribalism. Now, it's interesting because
I'll object just for a second. I don't know if the goal usually is purely adulthood. I think you're kind of reading it from an objectivist perspective. Generally, the goal is adulthood and tribe leader, whether it's leader of your own tribe, your family, or the capacity to like help those others around you that are in need.
Right.
Such as the despondent.
Which is really interesting, because that's why they adopted this one. Because the definition then of virtuous, like of this leader role, is very hard. You don't want to become a tyrannical leader over your group. You don't want to cause unnecessary tensions, right? So this is where the role of religion or ideology fills that gap. And religion is something that, you know, puts humility as an aspect, hopefully, at least from Peterson's interpretation. But so, and you've nailed it there, where it's like the Overton window has shifted so far that they only consider a code of conduct one that is leftist. So one that requires collective enforcement, left-wing, parental, and is not the only system to foster community. Self-governance, right-wing, adult is also valid. Liberal Western governments mandate the minimum required law to enable civility. This enables a widespread of suitable conduct. Okay, now this is really interesting. They caved. They no longer use the
SQLite
conduct. Yep, SQLite, they caved. This is now the page. The original document we put more was a code of ethics of the project founder. While we stand by those principles, they are not in line with the modern technical meaning of the code of conduct, and have hence been renamed Code of Conduct. The SQLite community has been a kind, welcoming, and well-mannered community since its inception nearly 2 decades ago. In that time, many of the qualities we've worked hard to bring to our project, safety, consistency, usability, and integrity among them, have become part of a community's culture as well. Much like the care and effort we put into securing the longevity of SQLite, we'd like to do the same for that community by clarifying our goals and expectations for all involved. To that end, the SQLite project has officially adopted the Mozilla community participation guidelines as its code of conduct.
Isn't there a difference between SQLite and most of these other websites that we've been looking at? Because is SQLite an open source? Oh, it is. Okay.
So it's something. It's in the same category of an open source project. But what we will find is, here's the reason of why they've changed this. This document was originally called Code of Conduct and was created in a slightly different format for the purpose of filing a box on the supplier registration form submitted to the SQLite developers by various minor clients. However, we subsequently learned that Code of Conduct has a specific technical meaning within many software development communities, a meaning which was at odds with the intent of this document. Hence, this document is now renamed and replaced by Code of Conduct that does comply with specific technical requirements, was inserted in place of the old name. This document is still sometimes used as code of conduct on supplier registration forms, but is not a code of conduct in the same sense that many communities mean a code of conduct. Rather, this document describes the foundational ethical principles upon which SQLite is based. Another way to look at this document is a succinct description of the SQLite founder's idea of what it means to be virtuous. Readers can also interpret this document as a primer on the worldview of the SQLite founder.
Yeah, I was thinking about that when you were scrolling through the rules of Saint Benedict, how most of those are all primarily individual virtues that, like, I would have to hold myself accountable to. There's no like outward appearances. It's like, don't be greedy. Now, greedy is an internal emotion, so like it would be something that you would have to kind of I don't know, work on yourself in that situation. It's very much personal, like, accountability over your own self by having all of these various virtues. So I suppose I can see like why, if like code of conduct is specifically a like carries this definition of a set of rules in which can be like called out, you can call out people for breaking, like you like kind of on Twitter, like you see somebody doxing somebody, you can report it for doxing or on, whereas all of these things, it's not like you can report anyone for not being drowsy. Yeah.
But it's also interesting, like a lot of these things are also directly against, like for instance, shun arrogance, do not love quarreling, respect your seniors, love your juniors, you know, hate no one. So a lot of these things are about, you know, assume the best, like it really defines it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because the Pacific, so this is the one they adopted instead. And we will see it's got all the exact same language as a contributor covenant. Be respectful, be direct, be inclusive, right? We will find, so use people's pronouns that they elect. Blah,
This
blah,
is
blah.
their new code of conduct, or this is their new code of ethics?
This is the new code of conduct, the one that they were forced to do to meet technical requirements to be used in companies. Personal tax, derogatory language, and it goes on, right? So we will find out that it actually is more explicit about all the aims we've seen so far in this discussion. And what I think this is a grave mistake, because what they will find is this will now be used to do the type of lynching that has happened previously. And so this is interesting because this is why what I refer to it as a cult, because it is so strong now where it's like, you know, the people study sociology or the grievance studies. They then they learn about hierarchy. They learn these theories that aren't scientific, and are filled with biases and prejudice. They then take that to the HR departments. The HR departments then mandate this on individuals. Oh, okay, most recently, we'll see this being used. Okay, here we go. This is
Good night, Kurt. Thanks for participating.
All right, thanks, Kurt. We will be joined. Oh, he's gone. Bummer, because it's unfortunate he's not joining the Taoism because he wanted to do the Taoism.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again next week for him. Yeah.
All right. Okay, Shamien, a very good satirical YouTuber. He lost his job. And it's fascinating. So he did editing. If no one knows Shamien, he does remixes of Peterson videos or Rubin Report videos or whatever, and he makes them really funny. So it'll be like Jordan Peterson versus Peterson Jordan or whatever it is. Or Ham Saris. And, you know, kind of twist their arguments to make them out to be horrific arguments. And it's really funny. So he lost his job because a manager of diversity and inclusivity joined the company, a niece of the manager, so nepotism. The niece then finds out he does these videos, had a screaming fit, fired him. Or rather, didn't renew his contract. So she had ability to do that. Now, the key piece here is this particular thread. How do I, show parental comments? Okay. God, how does this
Hey
thread
Ben,
thing
can
work?
you stop here for a moment?
Yeah.
Because isn't that a big deal? What just happened? I mean, isn't that wrongful termination or discrimination again?
Yeah. This is what I hit.
Mhm.
All right.
I mean, it's not like legally outside of their rights to not renew his contract, but yes, ethically, it's a huge.
Well, actually, this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
This is why code of conduct seems necessary. This comment, Shamien, if you're in the US, even if you are in a right to work state, you potentially have a case for wrongful termination due to political affiliation. Political affiliation is one of the few protected classes left for straight white men, other than disability. This is because your manager brought up her own political beliefs in the course of firing you. Jordan B. Peterson's work is inherently political. There is no way around it. That's what the manager said. And it's clear that she used made-up employee complaints as an excuse because she knows perfectly well that she crossed a legal line in order to get what she wanted. I would consult a lawyer who specializes in such things, or even just civil litigation in general. He may be willing to work on contingency. Part of the reason your former boss hung up on you is precisely because he is worried you are going to file suit and he thought you might be recording. He probably knows his niece is mentally political retarded, but didn't want to fight with her and end up having bad blood with his brother's sister's family. A lawsuit will mean depositions, which means bringing in employees in to testify. If none of them condemn you or admit to filing a complaint about you, you will look really bad for your company. His niece may even privately admit she made it all up and the owner will be forced to settle. You could easily live off the settlement until you find another job. It might be tough to get the process started, but it would be so worth it. And it might be worth it to try and get Jordan B. Peterson's eyes on this as well. You never know how he might be able to help.
Yeah, I was just thinking about how important Jordan Peterson's lawsuit against Laurier with Lindsay Shepherd is, and man, especially since like he joined in on that because Lindsay Shepherd played a video of Jordan Peterson. If it got in the eyes of Peterson's legal team, I don't know. I guess it would be a completely separate case because it's not against Laurier. That it's kind of completely separate from Peterson, but it's still.
Well, Peterson tweeted this thread. That's
oh really? Oh, okay. Yeah. Wow.
All right. So, getting disenfranchised and disillusioned young men on track and gainfully employed is a big goal of his. I would tell you to get more advice from legal advice, but most people there are straight up ideologically compromised and would probably try to discourage you from seeking legal help, telling you have no chances at it because you don't want to see someone friendly to JBP's ideas have a sort of victory. Here's where it gets interesting. Someone says, okay, lol, in your mind, how would that go? Yes, I'm being discriminated. How so? Are you a minority? Oh, okay, well, no. But you see my boss didn't renew my contract due to, okay, click. They hang up on him. So that's like a projected scenario. The person, someone replies, I assume you're being facetious, but plenty of countries that actually ensure their employees have rights take this sort of discrimination pretty seriously. If you're a large company, you can't just fire someone because you disagree with them politically. If you fire someone because they made offensive remarks or whatever she claims and they had complaints, you need to back up your claims if challenged. Otherwise, it is absolutely wrongful termination. This means records and documentation of complaints, documentation show that the employee has been warned previously, and efforts made to correct their behavior, all of which she has none of. He did mention a contract though, which here in Australia is a completely different thing. If you're contracted, basically none of this applies. Bad luck, I guess. So if it's part of the contract, at least in Australia, then tough biggies. Like you can't, if it's part of the contract, then sometimes you can discriminate, which is
Shamien in Australia?
Huh?
Is Shamien the...
I don't know. He didn't mention where he's from. But this is where it gets really interesting, right? Because if there is, if it's part of the contract, we can think of a code of conduct maybe, right? Then As seen by the SQLite, so this is my interpretation, as seen by the SQLite caving to the Mozilla public license due to company pressure, as well as what happened to James Damore, and the attempted coups on maintainers that implement the contributor covenant, all sourced above, it seems by adopting a code of conduct, it allows them to fire people based on political affiliation, as then the perceived aggressor isn't having a political difference, but they are violating the company's established code of conduct and thus the company culture and being disruptive to personnel. All would be impossible if not for such measures. So I think this is why the code of conducts are being done. It allows them to fire on things that legally they wouldn't be able to. And it forces projects such as SQLite to adopt them, otherwise they will not be used in company projects.
Oh, okay. So that's interesting. Okay, so they can put whatever type of code of conduct that they want up there. Because that's like part of their company rule base or whatever. Yeah, whatever they're associated with, like if it's a website, things like that. So that are separate from the types of typical legal like reasons for firing people, such as like fraud or embezzling money, things like that, or just being a shitty worker. Okay, wow.
Yeah. So here, it also includes indirect discrimination, microaggressions, for instance, in the Mozilla public license. I think SQLite have made a terrible mistake.
Because, okay, so legally, like, if they have this type of code of conduct that has the most leftist ideological positions in it, like, and they were to fire somebody because they didn't meet their code of conduct, that wouldn't be, as long as a person like agreed to the code of conduct when, I guess, being hired, that wouldn't be, he wouldn't have any type of legal case.
Yeah. So, and this is the thing, which is they're forcing this on the projects and on communities through parasitical contamination. So SQLite needed a code of conduct, otherwise they wouldn't be used. Their project.
Now, I don't get why they needed it. Who's enforcing them? Like, who's strong-arming them to put up some sort of code of conduct? Was that some sort of new internet rule that went out?
I'm not sure, but they're just saying it here. They're now being required to you know, like companies, for instance, licensing, like for the code. Your code needs to be of particular licenses in order for companies to adopt it. But if it's of company policy, for instance, that they're not allowed to use projects that don't have a particular code of conduct, right? Then
so
they will also not be able to adopt their projects.
So was it like they can't use any code from Ruby unless they also share Ruby's code of conduct? Is that it?
Yeah, or it'll be like a compatible code of conduct.
Okay.
For instance, like you'll see, so for instance, like with project licenses, there's copyleft licenses, copyright licenses. There's a whole category of different licenses. So there's like the OSI approved licenses. And these lists like which licenses are actually compatible with each other.
So it's a stipulant within the license that in order to use, in order for us to like give you the option to use our whatever it is that they're licensing out, you have to have some sort of equivalent code of conduct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
So yeah. So
Ben and John, I think one point here. I think it's about money, because many of the open source projects have private sponsors or companies that use it. They sponsor their, you know, servers, certain kind of infrastructure and all that. Because without having some kind of financial links to that company, I doubt if open source folks care about who is like using their projects. Like, I don't think Linus Torvalds cares if your company adopts Linux or not.
No, well, it's.
I mean, why would I care?
Well, yeah, that's true. So like they would be getting probably funding or support contracts and things like the maintenance. However, it's also like important because like even for small time people, right? Like this mafia of companies that would then be like, okay, this open source project doesn't meet our code of conduct requirements, we'll create our own alternative to it, right? We'll fork it and then we'll do our own code of conduct or whatever it is. So for instance, when SQLite adopted the rule of St. Benedict, a lot of conversation was around pooling it as a dependency for projects. Now, Mozilla seems to be a left-aligned company. They gave $100,000 to RiseUp, which is an email server that is used by Antifa. So they seem, and they also have done various other shenanigans. I had a tweet about it maybe like a year or two ago, where I covered it, but it's quite interesting. So for instance, they actually fired the CEO, Brendan Eich, because he personally, anonymously donated to a anti-equal marriage lobby effort.
The president of Mozilla did, and then they fired him?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
And regarding your point, Shamien, I don't know if they have to have been funded. I mean, it's likely that they're receiving their resources from many different places, but because of the monopoly, or it's not even necessarily a monopoly, but the I don't know, they do have a monopoly on kind of narrative via the interconnectedness of many of the different journalistic websites, especially within the tech community and like within the gamer community as well. There's a lot of interconnectedness within all of that. So if they have, all that is really required is a large enough. Hello? Okay, he went mute for a second. Yeah, I mean, it's. Can you guys hear me? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. It was just a minute. Yeah, all they really need is to have is to make a big enough splash, and they've proven that they're capable of doing so. Like what the Wall Street Journal and several other news outlets did with YouTube, in order to, like, all they have to do is reach out to the advertisers that are like buying GoodSense ads and things like that, to show them that it is bad for the brands that are, say, playing ads on white nationalist videos on YouTube, just for that instance. I don't know if some similar situation would be going on for these types of websites, but that's at least showing how it was possible in these other websites within YouTube specifically. But maybe that's quite a bit of a larger rabbit hole that maybe isn't entirely connected, because I'm not sure how much the journalism angle is really fitting into all of this. I don't know if
well, the tech Breitbart is one of the only right-leaning, and Quillette, they're the only ones who really cover tech issues, or from a right-wing or even centrist perspective.
Yeah. Well, yeah, with Quillette, it's more
so interesting, right? Like this Mozilla public one, it's even worse than the contributor covenant, because it explicitly states here like hurtful or harmful language related to all these things, right? And then, includes not using people's preferred pronouns, so even questioning the legitimacy of someone's gender identity, right? Like this brings up the Lawrence Southern attack helicopter meme, or the guy who wanted the pronouns prince. Now, however, if you're unsure if a word is derogatory, don't use it. This also includes repeated, subtle, or indirect discrimination. So this is the microaggressions.
Oh my gosh, yeah, indirect discrimination, wow.
Right? And this is the thing, like, you are not allowed to interrupt one of these speakers when they talk, right?
What?
You're not,
what speakers?
Like here. So here,
Which
like say at a conference, right?
Oh,
so
any
I
speakers.
participated at like the Node.js Amsterdam conference, and there was 3 keynote talks about diversity and inclusivity and how white males were not diverse. And you're not allowed to interrupt. You're not allowed to ask about this, right? Because then you'll get kicked out of the conference, right? And the thing is that these are keynotes, like these are the main track for the events. And the thing is like, you know, they will fire you. Like you will get fired. Your employees will be harassed. They will try and take over your projects, your open source projects. They will not do business with you if your project does not adopt their code of conduct. So they infiltrate the HR departments of these companies. They then make their company a cult member, which only does business with other people part of the cult. And they will attack anyone not part of that cult.
Now, I don't know if I'll go as far as you in proclaiming them a cult. I think an extremely strong case can be made that they are a religion. And I wouldn't proclaim them as any good religion that I see so far. I mean, but they are like definitely working their moral cause, and that is their primary purpose in what they're doing. And they're harboring themselves around that primary cause.
Yeah, I just want to bring up the definition of cult.
Okay.
A system of religious veneration and devotion directed towards a particular figure or object. A relatively small group of people having religious beliefs or practices regarded by others as strange or imposing excessive control over members. A misplaced or excessive admiration for a particular thing. And or a person or thing that is popular or fashionable among a particular group of section of society. And it's interesting, like generally what is part of a cult is like this excessive control over its members.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, this idea of groupthink, that you can't trust anyone not part of our cult.
Yeah, I remember like one of the tweets during the Kavanaugh hearings was like, progressive women divorce your Republican husbands. Now, I'm not sure how serious that tweet was, but I mean, that is at least one aspect of cult-like behavior of trying to close off personal connections with your family members or people that you're already interacting with that aren't also part of your own whatever religious ideas. Now, I guess maybe the reason I don't know, I'm not as open to this term just yet is because in my mind, a cult has a very physical, I guess, meaning to it. Like I imagine people meeting in dark corners and like performing sacrifices or doing weird rituals in some dark abandoned church or something like that. Now, what is fascinating is to think of this as some sort of like online cult where there are these secretive things going on. Like I'm not a huge I'm not too knowledgeable on Gamergate, but there definitely was some sort of secretive collusion going on between journalists in order to repeat the same types of things. There's like the memes on YouTube of all of these different news organizations on TV all stating the exact same message to their audience. And also like what happened with Alex Jones, like what was it, 3 or 4 different unrelated websites all dropped him like at the same time of night, like within a few hours of each other. And then after a while, well, Twitter seemed to be unrelated to that. So maybe, I don't know. But so yeah, thinking of it as like some sort of online cult, I'll have to think about that further. But because, yeah, I think the reason I'm apprehensive to use that is because of my thinking of a cult in regards to meeting up in person and sharing these secretive, I don't know, rituals with each other. Whereas, I don't know, it's kind of all taking place within the internet sphere, within cyberspace, instead of...
Well, it's not just cyberspace, like it's actual companies, like 100,000, you know, employee companies, right? Like Google, Facebook, you know, like the James Moore thing, universities, like this is a thing that has physical repercussions. Even like smaller thing, like the Shamien thing, like that wouldn't even be a tech company probably.
Yeah,
Right?
that is one of the weirdest things too. Because like,
No.
I mean, it's it's not like his YouTube channel like has his face or his name on it. It's just because the people in that company knew about it and got mad at him. Because usually it's like somebody's information is doxed, and then the moral outrage mob like contacts their company to try to get them fired because of what they tweeted or said or whatever it is that they did. But in this case, they were already there within his own company.
Yeah.
Oh man. So I was thinking, like, in regards to Shamien, it's probably unlikely that Peterson will help him out, but perhaps there could be some sort of hope for him in kind of going along the route as Hulk Hogan and Peter Thiel against Gawker, where if there's some sort of I don't know, millionaire out there that is willing to, I guess, help him out in his legal fees, that would be...
Well, one of the ideas I'm
somebody
having
with fuck you money really is what's needed. Like, I was thinking of like Notch initially, just because I don't know. On Twitter he seems pretty I don't know, pretty chill.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
So, well, the other option is we set up a job board, right? Where companies, as well as people looking for work and different people who are not part of this cult, can list themselves and support each other. But that will require people from the right to grow some bloody nuts and actually stand up for what they believe in, to stop bloody being silent. And like, that's the thing. It's just like, you know, it's like you would think Peterson would be the critical mass here, right? Like the James Damore thing. But it's just like, on all, people stay silent. And yeah.
Well, I don't know if like Peterson has enough, like, he's just one person and he's like dealing with his own project. This is larger than just one Peterson person.
But this is the thing, which is like, people like Damore will still get fired, and you know, there's anonymous people who participate in, you know, our meetings, and you know, they can't talk about Peterson for the same reasons that happened to Shamien. And it's just like, you know, if people actually gain courage, like what Ayn Rand talks about in Atlas Shrugged, right? And you know, actually did Peterson speak the truth, then and act the truth, right? And be willing to revise the truth. These are Peterson and Randian beliefs, right? Which is that then, hey, you would actually be able to fight this with resistance, right? You would actually have a, you know, you can localize the cult and you can have immunity against them. If you get fired, you will have companies you can go to, right? And right now it's just suppression and repression of everybody. And it's horrendous. Like, it's really like the Gulag Archipelago playing it out, but in the corporate world. So one of the points I touched on earlier that I just want to really get out is this, the why it's transactivism is so important here. So one of the things here that's really interesting is the rad fems with the trans activists. So what we'll find is, when we saw the Twitter code of conduct, it's one of the groups who got really upset about that was the rad fems. And
like the what are they called? Oh, TERFs, the trans exclusionary radical feminists.
Yeah, so I'm not sure particularly what you know, the names or whatever, but there is some interesting things here, which is there was a really good Twitter account. I don't think I've particularly linked it, but the argument that they present, which is an argument which is, okay, this trans women are real women, that is ideologically driven. There's debate about that. Ben Shapiro has great arguments about this. However, the rad fems have the belief that gender is an embodiment of sex. It is the social causes that arise from sex. So for instance, a woman has a uterus, they can get pregnant, they have menstruation, they have weaker body strength, they have all these physical things that manifest themselves behaviorally different. That gender is inherent. It is the embodiment of sex. In that way, there's true genders, which are the embodiment of sex.
So
Whereas
there's a trait associated with womanhood, such as the capacity to create life. And so, yeah, by taking on that label of being a woman, along with all of the other things that you mentioned, like going through a potentially traumatic puberty, it could be another aspect of womanhood, perhaps.
Potentially traumatic, man. Wasn't everybody's puberty traumatic?
Yeah,
I don't know.
but it's also like, you know, beating your brothers and things like that, right? Like the wrestling that is vital to a young boys growing up, and pushing those boundaries, and a desire to be the alpha in your social group, to push those boundaries, see who's strongest, right? And the way that aggression starts arising, that, and, you know, the relationship dynamics, these are all inherent parts of embodiment. And that's a different perspective. And this is one of the things that, you know, Peter Thiel has a good question. What do you believe that, you know, it seems the majority of people don't believe? And the answer to me is just that multiple perspectives or multiple things can be true about the same phenomena at once. And, you know, things are conflicting in these paradoxes.
I think they're gonna take away your Ayn Rand card for saying that.
Well, not really. You still haven't read Atlas Shrugged, dude.
Well, I don't know. I've interacted with quite a few objectivists. My objectivist red flags would automatically go up to you saying that.
Okay. Yeah. So, but then, so from the other side, the reason why the trans activists
Welcome, Tyler. By the way, sorry.
So arrogant. Is because it's the exact opposite. It's that gender has no relationship to sex, and gender is purely a social construct. And because it's a social construct, the onus, the aggressors that are preventing you from being your ideal state, the aggressors that are preventing you from rectifying your cognitive dissonance, your gender dysphoria, is society. They are the aggressor. They are those who are oppressing, repressing, and suppressing your ideal, your ability to gender express. What, you know, that term that we see all, you know, through all the code of conducts. And the onus, the only person who can rectify that is society. It is not on the individual to rectify that. It is on society to rectify that. And that is why they can have that arrogance, because they're right and they're being oppressed by society's gender stereotypes.
It's interesting that it's not just like part of society, it's all of society, because there is a significant and vocal minority that is supportive of all of this activism, right? But that's not good enough. It's not good enough that their tribe only be of a specific size. It seems adamant, insistent that absolutely everyone be completely homogenous in thought, right? And that's the essential feature of it, I think. In an abstract sense, these code of conducts and anything like them are just control structures that are used primarily in no different relationship than the way that priests determined that they could use religious influence to control people, right? It's just part of the ever ongoing trend of people who like control sifting to the top of power situations and then trying to exercise control, right? Drawing it up and
all righty. I think it's interesting. I think we've probably I've communicated all the points I think that I wanted to cover. And, you know, there's more points that everyone can go into on our discussion threads. All the links are in the video description. Do you have any final words for this meeting, Any other participants? Yeah. You guys can say no rather than just letting it dial out to silence. But okay, so we'll wrap it up. So this was a discussion by the Jordan B. Peterson community. You can find all the details at jordanbpeterson.community. We organize this study group. Every week we discuss topics such as this, or things relating to the Jordan B. Peterson ecosphere, universe. We have discussions currently at Saturday 3 a.m. UTC, as well as 3 p.m. UTC. This one was the podcast summary session. Our discussions are completely, this one is a summary session, so it's recorded, but we have our private discussions that are completely confidential, and we value that, because the people attending now is just a fraction of the people who attend the conferences. You can get all the details again at jordanbpeterson.community. I want to thank the participants who joined today directly in this call. So Tyler, Sumit, John, and I'm not sure if the person who joined earlier wants us to say his name. I think so, but I'm not going to risk that. And also the people who participated in the chat. We had a pretty lively chat for this video. Sorry about the beginning. Hopefully we can trim that. But yeah, thanks, and hopefully be a part. And now we'll start our private discussion sections for Taoism, which we'll do a summary recorded session for next week.
Yeah, this is where the juicy stuff happens. So
yeah. So this was a recap. Come along to the discussions where we hash these things out. All right, thanks everybody. Peace.